Chapter 252. Pretty boy, I'm here to save you, la 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 la. Yuan Zhao howled as he charged forward with the water dragon that he had created with all of his origin substances. Immediately afterwards, the water dragon turned into a sieve under the barrage of gunfire. Water splashed everywhere and its volume shrank by half. Yuan Zhao roared angrily. The water dragon on the ground opened its mouth and spat out a column of water like a high-pressure pump. Even though it wasn't very powerful, it was enough to scatter the crowd. Even the people who were invisible were exposed by this alien attack. The water dragon that had shrunk by half transformed into a blurry giant horse. It was unclear whether it was a horse riding a horse or a centaur. It raised the pitchfork in its hand and stabbed the person at the very front to death. It smiled brightly at Huai Shi through the crowd. It looked as if it was saying, "Are you touched that your big brother is here to save you?" Huai Shi was speechless. All he could do was roll his eyes. "Be careful of your back!" A wandering cavalry blade suddenly rose into the air, slashing towards Yuan Zhao's neck from a tricky angle. Yuan Zhao hurriedly used his trident to knock the blade away. His face paled as the trident swept across, shattering two of the horse's legs. The galloping centaur paused for a moment. Immediately afterwards, everyone's guns were pointed at Yuan Zhao's face. Huai Shi sighed. Everything was over. I'll just continue to rain justice down from the heavens. Immediately afterwards, he heard the youth roar angrily, "Scram!" Yuan Zhao howled. He raised his trident and slammed it down in front of him. Water rippled outwards. The Pegasus that had transformed into a dragon whinnied and turned into a curtain of water, barely blocking some of the bullets. However, even more bullets landed on his body. Even his face was torn apart by the bullets, causing blood to spurt everywhere. However, the Pegasus continued to gallop forward. Amidst the youth's angry roars, the trident swept outwards. The last of the water rippled outwards, creating a sharp blade that forcefully pushed the crowd aside. "I'm going to save you today." Yuan Zhao howled as he ran out of energy and advanced. Guochang waved his hand. A tall and sturdy guardian lifted up a large shield and slammed it into the ground. Just like that, the heavy tower shield pushed forward like a wall, crushing towards Yuan Zhao amidst the rumbling sounds. In the next moment there was a loud explosion. Yuan Zhao took a step forward and turned around. The trident curved into a faint arc in the air. Following his stride and the push of his palm, it suddenly bounced off. The trident's blade lit up with a blazing radiance. The tip of the spear left his hand and flew out like a dragon. It pierced through the shield and smashed the head behind it like a watermelon before continuing to fly forward. Yuan Zhao, who was in hot pursuit, once again gripped the spear tightly. Viscous blood dripped from the spear's body. He had already stepped within 10 steps of Huai Shi. Beneath his feet, a pair of light golden boots that Huai Shi had never seen before suddenly shone. His speed, which had already reached its limit, suddenly increased again. "All of you, scram!" On his hands, a bracelet-shaped border relic lit up. Yuan Zhao's arm suddenly turned scarlet red. Scarlet flames ignited on the tip of the spear. Following his piercing posture, a fierce light suddenly burst forth. On his ear, a strange earring that clearly didn't match him sprinkled the light of blessing. Huai Shi's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Where the fuck did this godly equipment come from? Immediately afterwards, he was intimidated by the roar. Yuan Zhao stepped forward again. Facing all the ascendants, he took a step forward. All the blood drained from his face. The youth's face was deathly pale, but the light of thunder lingered in his eyes. Immediately afterwards, the sound of thunder burst forth from his hand. It was hard to describe the ferocity and swiftness of that spear. It was as if it had truly transformed into a bolt of lightning that struck down from the clouds. It cut through the torrential rain and the hurricane, ripped apart the boundary between the sky and the earth, and completely pierced through the world's largest heaven and earth in a single throw. It stung every pair of eyes. The few ascendants blocking the front were instantly crushed into a bloody mist by the spear, and disappeared in an instant. Lin Yu screamed angrily. The cauldron shook, and the shadow creature that had been hired by bait according to the contract once again transformed into a sinister appearance, and pounced on Yuan Zhao. Immediately afterwards, it was torn apart by the waves that burst forth from that spear, even the cauldron that it was attached to cracked. The weak water condensed from the serpent divine mark slowly seeped out. After the spear, the brilliance of the thunder instantly dissipated. And in the crowd, there was no longer any silhouette of Yuan Zhao and Huaishur. Only a perfectly straight ravine remained, leading straight into the distant jungle. It cut through a blank trail, and finally plunged into the surging river water. They disappeared. They escaped. In the long silence, everyone was stunned in place. After a long time, there were screams that were close to madness. Lin Yu roared angrily. Her eyes were burning red from this unprecedented humiliation. Chase after them. She held the alchemy cauldron that she had found with great difficulty, and her trembling fingers stroked the huge crack on it. In the end, she screamed like a mad woman, "What are you waiting for? Chase after them! I want to tear that bastard, and that motherless bastard of the Yuan clan to shreds." Guochang and Shi Jiang glanced at each other, and their faces immediately became bitter. Following the fluctuations of the river water, Huaishur felt that he was finally pulled to the shore by Yuan Zhao. After a long time of suffocation, he began to cough violently. With great difficulty, he finally gasped for breath, and finally raised his head to ask the question that had been stuck in his heart for a long time: "Where did you get so much equipment?" "I have a deep foundation. What do you know?" Yuan Zhao grinned proudly. Under Huaishur's suspicious gaze, he finally shrugged helplessly and looked elsewhere. "I felt that I might not be able to beat them, so I went to Ginza first and found Sister Yi to treat my leg. Then I borrowed a few pieces of equipment. But the main thing is still relying on my skills, you understand? When I used that spear, they were scared to death." "Alright, you're good." Huaishur sighed. "If you have the ability to borrow equipment, why don't you borrow a few more good brothers to chop these bastards to death?" This time he succeeded in being a hero and saving the pretty boy, so this brat will be very arrogant in the future. But since he had saved him, he shouldn't attack him and let him be proud for a while. Shaking his head, he climbed up and looked around. When he heard the footsteps coming from upstream, he suddenly frowned. "We have to go." But Yuan Zhao didn't reply to him. Yuan Zhao sat on the ground, leaning against a tree, as if he wanted to hide his back. His face was pale. When Huaishur looked over, he squeezed out a nonchalant smile. Soon after, he couldn't hold it in any longer and spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression couldn't help but contort into a ball and cry out loud. "It hurts." Blood mixed with the river water slowly flowed down from his back and fell to the ground, dyeing the tree dark red. Huaishur was stunned. He reached out and forced Yuan Zhao's back to turn around, only to see several big holes so deep that bones could be seen. There were also broken internal organs and bones inside. Traces of dark shadows entangled inside, eroding his flesh and rotting his internal organs. Soon, flies drilled out of the eggshell and flew up from the mangled flesh, gunshot wounds, military knife slashes, and curses. Huaishur's expression turned ugly. He stared at Yuan Zhao's face that was dripping with snot. "Why didn't you say so earlier? Cut the crap, I'm the big brother, do you understand?" While twitching, Yuan Zhao actually had the strength to roll his eyes and stare at him. "Save a little brother, just save a little brother, what's wrong with that?" Huaishur was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but sigh. "You're just calling me big brother, you can't be so stubborn, right? You've already called me big brother, and you still want to go back on your word?" Yuan Zhao didn't know where he got the strength from, but he grabbed Su Chen's collar and angrily yelled, "Even if you're a little brother for a day, you're still a little brother, do you understand? In the future, you're not allowed to steal my girlfriend, otherwise Otherwise, you'll be stabbed 3 times and 6 times. As he spoke, he couldn't help but grit his teeth, and his face began to twitch. Tears and snot flowed down his face, and he could no longer hold on to Huai Shi. He could only powerlessly slide down from the tree. He resisted the urge to choke up and stared at Huai Shi's face, his expression serious. Now I don't owe you anything, do you understand? It's me who owes you. Huai Shi didn't want to argue with him anymore. When he saw Yuan Zhao's twisted expression, he sighed and used up all of the origin substance he had just recovered to condense the axe blade in his hand. Don't hold it in anymore. Do you need my help? When he understood Huai Shi's meaning, Yuan Zhao spat out a mouthful of saliva and stretched out his neck. Come. He glanced at Huai Shi. Remember to hurry up and run. Forget it, you're a disaster anyways. Even if you want to die, it won't be that easy. As he spoke, he closed his eyes. Huai Shi nodded and slowly raised the axe blade, aiming it at Yuan Zhao's neck. However, Yuan Zhao suddenly opened his eyes and said, "Wait a moment. Remember to help me return my things to Sister Yi. Also, don't lose this gun, okay?" Huai Shi nodded. As such, Yuan Zhao closed his eyes and stretched out his neck for the kill. However, he immediately opened his eyes again, a bit worried. "Hurry up, I'm scared of pain." "Okay." Huai Shi sighed helplessly, indicating for him to stretch his neck out. Yuan Zhao glanced at him with worry, but in the end, he still closed his eyes. However, his eyelids blinked and he opened them again. "Right, there's also... You're so annoying." Huai Shi impatiently interrupted him, and the axe blade fell. Yuan Zhao disappeared. A small gold coin fell to the ground. In the end, he's still a dead Chunibu brat. It's not good to be happy. Huai Shi propped himself up with the axe and recalled Yuan Zhao's stunned look before he left. He couldn't help but laugh. After laughing for a while, he stopped laughing. His eyes gradually darkened. Listening to the sound of footsteps gradually approaching from afar, Huai Shi silently looked at the part of the tree trunk that was dyed red and fell into deep thought. Should he leave? He should leave. If he walked faster now, none of them would be able to catch up with him. But was this matter over just like that? Just because he offended a crazy woman when he was cooking? He looked down at the axe in his hand, sighed, and asked the red glove beside him, "Do you think we should leave?" "Let's go," the red glove said. "But I don't want to leave." Huai Shi scratched his head and emphasized, "I really don't want to leave." The red glove didn't say anything. He silently took the sacrificial knife that Huai Shi handed over and looked in the direction of the enemy. Huai Shi picked up the axe again and picked up the equipment that Yuan Zhao had left behind. He lightly tapped them, a pair of light gold boots, a pair of bracelets that amplified strength, and an earring that could replenish a bit of origin substance. With the origin substance, the mountain ghost sage insignia could be restored. If his vitality was extracted, his wounds would quickly heal, and he would be able to move again. So it wasn't too bad. At least he could still be sent away. "There's no need," the red glove said. "There's plenty of time in the future. You know, I actually didn't need him to save me. I could have handled it myself. I sent him away mostly because I felt that he would be in the way if he stayed." Huai Shi looked down at the pool of blood and muttered to himself, "But he really did come to save me." The red glove was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "You're regretting it." "Yes, I'm regretting it." Huai Shi sighed softly. "If only I had used the flyer that kitten gave me earlier. Why would I owe him a favor? No, I should have been more cautious. I shouldn't have been so arrogant as to think that I could take on 2 border mercenary groups by myself. But what I regret the most is that before he came to save me, I never treated him as a friend." He laughed softly. "I just wanted to use him." "There's no need," the red glove said coldly. "This is just a game." "Who says it isn't?" Huai Shi shrugged and gripped the axe in his hand, looking in the direction of the footsteps. "That's why I wanted to play a game with them." Chapter 253. 5 minutes later, in the forest, Shi Jiang lowered his head and lit the cigarette at the corner of his mouth. After taking a few deep breaths, he grabbed the subordinate beside him and pointed at the thing hanging on the tree. "What is this?" In the silence, the subordinate hesitated for a long time, not knowing what he was talking about. He tried to read the two blood-red words on the tree stump, "Gift." Shi Jiang flew into a rage. He kicked him into the tree, hanging him together with the blood-red gift. "Gift my ass!" The veins on his forehead popped out. He angrily crushed the burning cigarette in his mouth. He turned around and roared at his panicked subordinates. "What is this called? This is called fucking disgrace. You 7 people went to catch a seriously injured little ghost, but in the end, not only did you not find him, you were even hung on a tree like this. If this isn't disgrace, then what is?" In the silence, no one replied. Only the victim hanging from the tree released a difficult sound, blood slowly flowing out from his chest. Mosquitoes and flies flew up and landed, releasing an annoying buzzing sound. Shi Jiang was silent for a long time. He pulled out his gun, aimed at the tree, and pulled the trigger again and again. After the rumbling sound, the ravaged little Judge Jean finally fell to the ground. "Old Lee suffered. When we go back and split the money, he will get an extra 10%, which will be deducted from your share. Does anyone have any objections?" Shi Jiang asked. The subordinates quickly shook their heads. "Very good." Shi Jiang nodded in satisfaction. Then he roared out, "What the fuck are you all standing there for? Go and find him for me. Find those 2 little bastards for me. This father will tear their bodies to 10,000 pieces. Otherwise, just wait for your bodies to be torn to 10,000 pieces by those 2. Under Shi Jiang's roar, the sound of giant trees collapsing in the distance continuously sounded. Flames rose. In the gradually rising smoke, the tyrannical scarlet red spread through the forest, burning everything to ashes. The angry crows screeched and circled in the air. There were jet-black birds that continuously swooped down. Soon after, they quickly withered in the spreading smoke, withering, turning into shriveled corpses. In the thick smoke, the shadows of the snakes slowly condensed and became clearer. In the end, they entered the boiling abyss. Fierce poison in the cauldron. It turned into a strange medicinal juice that looked like liquid darkness. This was no longer in the realm of refining medicine. It was almost like creating a new life, greedily harvesting all of the surrounding origin substances and raising the evil spirits in the womb. Almost there, as various precious materials were thrown into the cauldron, Lin Yu's smile became more and more joyful. Amidst his hoarse laughter, the tragic scar on his cheek, which had just closed up, burst open again. It was so hideous. Blood dripped down and sprinkled into the cauldron. Wisps of blood-colored smoke rose and drifted in the wind like tiny snakes. At the side, Zhen Sui could not help but take a few steps back to avoid the blood smoke that swept past the tip of her nose. He secretly complained that there were so many people in the team. Why did he have to be a bodyguard, a job with no future at all? However, when he looked at Lin Yu's back, a trace of fear appeared amidst his initial unhappiness and resistance. Brewing potions, throwing in calamity and death, producing destruction and despair, these female ascendants, known as witches, were intoxicated by the refinement of negative origin substances and the extraction of calamity. They were known for their terrifying poisons and curses. Although they were not recognized as alchemists, the destructive power they could cause was even more terrifying than alchemists. However, 9 out of 10 of them were insane, and one of them had already become a complete lunatic. Glancing at her, she would kill your entire family and your neighbor's family. Among the witches, she was already the type that was easy to talk to. After all, they had to use medicine as a medium to summon monsters from the depths of hell all year round. The essence of their souls was about to be assimilated by the abyss. Even if they looked as beautiful as flowers, they were essentially no different from man-eating flowers. Anyone with a slightly normal brain would not want to be targeted by a walking cherry bomb, right? Personally, serving a cherry bomb was even more unbearable in the unbearable silence. He looked at the dense forest in the distance that constantly rumbled, hoping to hear some good news amidst the rising flames. For example, if those two guys finally caught something, he would be able to escape as soon as possible. But soon, the flustered and exasperated Shi Jiang walked out of the ashes with a face full of soot. He spat out a mouthful of black spittle, his face ashen. His heart sank. "I didn't find them." From afar, Shi Jiang shouted unhappily, "They've already run away. If you ask me, we are wasting time." He walked back. "Wait a minute." Zhen Sui subconsciously raised her gun and aimed at the approaching Shi Jiang. The two guards at the side also stood up and blocked in front of her. "Password! What kind of stupid password is this? Even I have to check it." Shi Jiang's expression became more and more unsightly. He cursed, but his footsteps continued to move forward. Zhen Sui pulled the trigger without any hesitation. The bullet hit Shi Jiang's foot as a warning. Password. But Shi Jiang's movements did not stop. Instead, he sped up, madly rushing forward. He was still 15 meters away from them, but his speed was inconceivably fast, as if he was flying. In the air, dozens of moving red lines suddenly flew over, piercing through. As he madly ran, Shi Jiang flew up, changing his posture in the air. He brushed past dozens of blood-colored smoke to dodge, but he was unable to dodge Zhen Sui's bullet. Following the roar of the gunshot, Shi Jiang's figure flickered. In the end, Huai Shi's face appeared. "I've been waiting for you." As he laughed, a tall and sturdy figure suddenly appeared in the empty air. Guochan, who was hiding at the side, held a pitchfork in his hand. He had been accumulating power for a long time. After confirming that the person attacking was Huai Shi, he suddenly attacked. The pitchfork stirred the wind, stabbing towards Huai Shi's chest. It pierced through his chest. Under the extraction of Fang Liang's divine mark, a dense negative origin substance gathered on the pitchfork. Guochan could not help but let out a happy moan. But he quickly felt that something was wrong. His hand felt empty. It was as if he had pierced through a cloud of fog. Huai Shi's face flickered again. In the end, it turned into the red glove's pale side profile. After being pierced through by the pitchfork, the red glove expressionlessly raised his hand, showing Guochan the dark gold vambrace on his wrist and the densely packed metal bombs in front of his chest. Oh no! Guochan subconsciously opened his eyes wide. He had originally planned for everything, even guarding against Huai Shi's sudden attack. The only thing he had not expected was that Huai Shi would actually tie this dark gold equipment to the bombs. In the next instant, Ramses' wrath burst forth. Flames soared into the sky. Following the roar of the explosion, a dark origin substance appeared from the ashes of the dense forest, like a viper lurking in the thorns. The mountain ghost opened its eyes and shot towards the enemy like lightning. This was Yu's step, which used up the last of its origin substance. It was as fast as lightning. Amidst the rumbling of the air being torn apart, Huai Shi stepped forward, trampling on the cracked earth, stirring up flying ashes and dust as she swept past the astonished ascendant. In the next instant, a cut from the sacrificial blade appeared on his neck. Blood spurted out and was sucked into the hurricane, forming a scarlet trail. In the blink of an eye, he was already within reach. Instinctively, Zhen Sui took a step forward and stood in front of Lin Yu, perfectly fulfilling her duty in the instant of the attack. Immediately afterwards, she pulled the trigger, hoping that she could delay him for just a moment. However, Huai Shi's speed did not decrease in the slightest. He did not dodge or evade, only moving forward, allowing a wound to appear in front of his chest. He raised his axe and slashed downwards. A handful of blood flew into the air and fell into the cauldron. Countless wisps of blood and fog madly pounced towards Huai Shi. Immediately afterwards, the burning mountain ghost's flames forcefully pulled it into the crack in front of his chest. The surging flames burned it, turning it into ashes in the cauldron. The dark green ghostly flames in Huai Shi's eyes suddenly rose, becoming more and more berserk. Ignoring the curse that Lin Yu had released, the spear of compassion condensed in his hand and stabbed forward, piercing into the crack left behind by the origin substance. In the blink of an eye, it pierced through. The cauldron used to refine the magic medicine was smashed to pieces. However, it was already too late. The viscous darkness exploded, forming a vortex. A strange silvery shadow flowed out from within, like mercury. It clearly reflected the surrounding scenery, reflecting a dazzling light. Even a nearby ascendant who had rushed forward to protect Lin Yu was dazed by the light. In the blink of an eye, he lost consciousness, his body decaying and turning into dust. Using the curse magic medicine as bait, the monster from the depths of hell descended here out of thin air. It wriggled greedily, its smooth body like water ripples, pouncing towards Huai Shi who was in front of Lin Yu. Huai Shi swung his hand with all his might and threw out the axe of wrath. However, he immediately felt his vision go black amidst Lin Yu's sharp laughter. The connection between him and the axe of wrath disappeared. The axe blade was swallowed up by the wriggling silver light, as if it had fallen into an abyss, disappearing without a trace. The silver light stirred up waves under the slashing of the axe blade, but it quickly healed and calmed down. Gradually, it reflected Huai Shi's appearance. The clearer the reflection, the more terrifying the suction force from the silver mirror. It was as if it wanted to suck his soul into it. As long as it shone on something, it would seize it. Eternal imprisonment. Huai Shi flipped his hand and used the last of his strength to throw out the sacrificial knife. However, as the suction force weakened slightly, the sacrificial knife was also swallowed up. Drinking to quench thirst, he only had time to make one last move. He took out the flyer that Kitten gave him from his pocket. He unfolded it forward. The silver light that was gradually becoming clearer suddenly stagnated, and the wriggling mercury suddenly shook violently. In front of the flyer, the originally smooth mirror surface shook rapidly, but in front of the cartoonish face, it could not reflect the simplest outline. There was a sharp crash. As if the mirror had been broken, the silver light screamed, and dozens of cracks appeared on it. It trembled violently, and the source substance that it had swallowed dissipated and returned to Huai Shi's hand. The wriggling silver mirror shrieked as it abruptly shrunk back into the small whirlpool that had yet to dissipate. It actually escaped from the flyer without even looking back. In a brief moment of dead silence, Huai Shi turned around and stared at Lin Yu's dull face. He grinned and smiled. "I almost forgot," he said. "I'm also a prince." Chapter 254. The scream sounded and stopped abruptly. After a short pause, it burst out again, tearing the curse, breaking the darkness, and smashing the resentment. He would move forward openly, destroying evil. In an instant, the broken sword in Huai Shi's hand had penetrated her abdomen. It was like a natural nemesis. Just by piercing the flesh, it brought terrible damage to the snake's stigmata. Lin Yu let out a broken scream. "How does it feel to have virtue?" Huai Shi looked at the distorted face and asked with a smile. His fingers slowly twisted the hilt and stirred the wound, making the screams and curses sharper. As he raised his right hand and put the sacrificial knife on Lin Yu's neck, the sound of the wind behind his head stopped abruptly. The burning pitchfork was only an inch away from the back of his head. But this inch was as far away as the abyss. "Please give us some private space, thank you." Huai Shi slowly turned back and saw Guochang's livid expression. His fingers trembled slightly and cut Lin Yu's neck. Guochang's face suddenly changed. Under Huai Shi's coercion, he reluctantly took a few steps back. He waved his hand and motioned for the other team members not to come forward. Lin Yu's face was distorted. "Guochang, you are a piece of trash. Go, kill. Ahaf. Shu." Huai Shi twisted the hilt slightly and interrupted her scolding and cursing. He looked at the distorted face and was serious for the first time. It was only now that he realized that even though she was so angry and ferocious, her face was still pretty. She was indeed a rare beauty. We meet again, Auntie. Do you really have to do skincare? He sighed softly. Why don't you take care of the wound on your face? Come, let me help you. Casually, he poured a handful of silver blood potion and sealed her mouth with a potion that quickly hardened into metal. Finally, with a click, an iron ring was hung around her neck. It was connected to an alchemy bomb the size of a fist. Back off. Huai Shi repeated to the air beside him. Back off a little. Guo Chang's expression changed. He gritted his teeth and waved his hand. A faint wind blew in the air, as if something was flying away. I said back off. Huai Shi suddenly twisted the hilt of her sword, causing Lin Yu, whose mouth was sealed, to let out a muffled scream. Her body convulsed violently. I'm sorry, but I can't see where the invisible person is hiding. Can you please turn off that equipment? It was like asking someone to turn off the lights before going to bed. It was polite and gentle, but it made Guo Chang's expression twitch. After a long while, Guo Chang waved his hand again. Behind him, a figure carrying a wireless backpack appeared, followed by a group of ascendants surrounding them. There were 9 of them in total. Huai Shi waved his hand, and a slender chain with black smoke and sparks suddenly flew out. It quickly swept around the surroundings twice without any pattern, and suddenly bound something. It tightened, pulled, and brought it in front of Huai Shi. Huai Shi raised his hand and chopped down with his axe. A golden judge fell to the ground. He heaved a sigh of relief, and tied the chains of sorrow around Lin Yu's body, as if he was tying a ferocious beast. Holding the chains, he found a clean rock and sat down. He raised his head and looked at the enemies in front of him, who had ugly expressions on their faces. Until now, only half a minute had passed. In the forest, Shi Jiang, who was in charge of the search, rushed back with people. Seeing the scene in front of them, without saying anything, they naturally understood what had happened. Their expressions became fierce. Now everyone is here. Huai Shi smiled and said, We can have a good talk. There is nothing to talk about. Guo Chang said expressionlessly, Let her go, and we will let you go. Are you dreaming? Huai Shi was amused and pointed to the place under his feet. If anyone dares to take a step forward from where you are now, I will kill her immediately. Even if I can't do any harm to her, I can make her withdraw from the competition. You also said that you can only make her withdraw from the competition. Guo Chang said coldly, This is just a game, Huai Shi. You don't have any more chips in your hands, so you can only accept my conditions. If you let her go, I can let you go. So you have nothing to lose? Huai Shi shrugged. I don't care. Anyway, I can just go back to the Astronomical Society. You know about the Astronomical Society, right? I am a member with potential. Even if I lose the competition and can't get a ranking, my performance before is there. Can anyone deny my strength? However, when the time comes, the one who will be in trouble will be you, right? He looked at Guo Chang's face and smiled. The Lin family seems to be very powerful. They hired you to be a slave just to make her withdraw from the competition? Guo Chang's expression froze. Under the youth's mocking smile, he felt powerless. For border mercenaries like them who were used to doing dirty work, even if they looked free and unrestrained, how could they not be treated as hyenas that could come and go at any time, advancing and retreating involuntarily? He was silent for a long time before asking, What do you want? I haven't thought about it yet. Huai Shi scratched his head and shrugged. It depends on your sincerity. Kill him. Lin Yu angrily struggled. Ignoring the wound on her face, she forcefully tore open the wound on her mouth and screamed, Don't worry about me, I want him to die. But Huai Shi snapped his fingers and the voice came to an abrupt stop. The rope of sorrow had already been stuffed into her mouth. But Guo Chang immediately heard Shi Jiang's footstep. The broken Yazi mask was full of fierceness. He turned around and angrily glared. What are you doing? Didn't you hear what the employer said? Shi Jiang's expression was dark and ruthless. I've fucking had enough, you know? I shouldn't have fucking believed a bastard like you. Still want to negotiate? Negotiate my ass. Since when have I ever negotiated with hostage-takers? Huai Shi's expression didn't change. He only slightly twisted the hilt of his sword. In an instant, Lin Yu violently spasmed and twitched in pain. The sacrificial blade on her neck pressed down a bit. The blade greedily absorbed blood, making Lin Yu's face become even paler. Guochang reached out and blocked Shi Jiang. Old Shi, don't go forward. Then what about the thing you promised me? Shi Jiang asked back. So many of my brothers have died, what about the thing you promised me? If you don't give it to me, I'll take it myself. He pushed Guochang aside and pulled out his blade, walking towards Huai Shi. Guochang turned around and saw the faint smile on Huai Shi's face. The smile was calm and indifferent, as if he was looking at a joke that had nothing to do with him. He sighed and gave a look to his subordinate behind him. Then, he pulled out his pitchfork and suddenly stabbed out. Shi Jiang's footsteps stopped. He turned around in shock and vomited blood. You again, sorry, old Shi. Guochang looked into his eyes. I didn't have a choice. Just like when he had stabbed him in the back, Shi Jiang cursed, spat out a mouthful of blood, and fell to the ground. As he fell to the ground, the backlash of the oath followed. In the air, the image of a Xieji appeared. It suddenly opened its mouth and sucked away a third of Guochang's life force and a third of his origin substance. It also removed a third of his sacred scar. It was permanent. Even after he left this game, it still wouldn't heal. But as he was dying, Shi Jiang wasn't willing to let this traitor who had betrayed him go. He used all of his strength to raise the military blade and send all of his blood into it. The light of Yazi's wrath and the military blade rose into the air and slashed towards Guochang. At the same time, Guochang's subordinates, who had already received orders from Guochang, attacked Shi Jiang's subordinate. The two sides instantly became chaotic. Jin judges continuously fell to the ground. What a great show! In the chaotic battle, even the invisible dark gold equipment was cut to pieces by the pursuing military blade. However, under Guochang's counterattack, the military blade was also cut to pieces. He propped himself up with an iron fork, doing his best to gasp for breath. In the end, only 3 people were left standing. Guochang gave a signal and the man called Mu and walked up. With a slash of his blade, he cleaned up the remaining opponents who were still breathing. The ground was a complete mess. Only 14 gold coins were thrown over by the judge. You want sincerity. Guochang stared at Huai Shi's eyes. Now, let her go. Huai Shi laughed and asked back. You only have 3 people left, what are you going to use to talk to me? How about this, you kill the other 2 and then kill yourself. I'll let her go, a promise worth 1,000 gold, how about it? Then you'll chase after her and kill her? Don't play this game with me. Guochang sneered. I'll use this to talk to you, how about it? He bent down and picked up a heavy package from the border relics that had fallen from Shi River. There was a countdown timer embedded on it, and it had the red and blue lines that the audience loved to see. It was clearly a package of alchemy explosive. The things that Shi Jiang prepared, one package is enough to send half of the park to the sky. Guochang said, let her go, otherwise we'll all die together. Then how can I believe you? Huai Shi indifferently asked back. Muan, where the hell did you go? Guochang roared, calling the stooped middle-aged man over. The middle-aged man opened his palm, the last tattoo on his palm disappeared, and the shadow of a Xie appeared once again. If you let her go, I'll throw the bomb away. Guochang gasped for breath, staring at Huai Shi's eyes. When the time comes, we'll fight to the death, otherwise we'll all die together. Good. Huai Shi nodded. The Xieji's shadow looked around and then disappeared. The contract was established. Thus, Huai Shi snapped his fingers, and in an instant, the rope of sorrow was released. But before Lin Yu could do anything, His palm suddenly pulled on the hilt of the sword, tearing a huge wound. In the sudden scream, the sacrificial knife slashed across Lin Yu's wrist, nimbly picking out 2 insignificant fascia and cutting it. Finally, it pierced into her thigh. "Run, girl." Huaishur let go, staring at the resentful face, slowly took a step back and said with a smile, "Run, before I find you, run as far as you can." "One day, Huaishur, one day." Lin Yu looked at him deeply, a sickly malevolence appeared on her pale face. "I'll make you regret everything you've done today." "Is that so? That's a pity." Huaishur shrugged helplessly. "I've already regretted what I've done not long ago, but unfortunately, the person I regret is not you." Lin Yu stopped talking, gritted her teeth, and endured the pain. The snake divine Mark froze the wound hastily and turned to leave. "You have to be faster." Huaishur looked at her receding figure and reminded her loudly, "I'll come to find you soon, remember to hide well." Lin Yu's speed increased, and she stumbled as she ran. Soon, she disappeared at the end of the street. In the dead silence, Huaishur retracted his gaze from her, turned around, and looked at Guochang. "Now it's your turn." The knife and axe fell from his hands, colliding. Sparks burst forth, illuminating the ghost fire in his eyes. "Hurry up, gentlemen," he said. "I'm in a hurry." Chapter 255. P.S. I actually wanted to call this chapter Old Town Road. Amidst the silence, Guochang silently stared at Lin Yu's back as it gradually disappeared. She had abandoned them without even looking back. Even though this was exactly what he had hoped for, when it really happened, it still made him feel exceptionally powerless. "Has she left?" he muttered softly. "Yes." Huaishur sighed and nodded. "But I'll catch up with her soon and kill her. I hope she doesn't run too far." His tone was as if he was playing a game of hide-and-seek. After she hid well, he would go and find her. But wasn't this a game? It was from the beginning. It was just that some people were destined not to enjoy it. Guochang stared at Huaishur's indifferent expression and slowly shook his head. "The Lin family won't let you go." Huaishur scratched his head curiously. "That Lin family you mentioned. Is he very powerful?" Guochang was stunned. After a long time, he seemed to have understood something and laughed self-deprecatingly. "Yes, compared to the Astronomy Society, even the 7 major systems can't be considered powerful, right? I should have understood earlier. With your skills, how can your background be ordinary?" "What is your background?" he asked. "Can you let me know before I die?" Dongqing District No. 2 Middle School in Donghai City, Grade 12 Art Class, Cello Specialty. "Do you want to learn?" Huaishur looked at him calmly. "I'll teach you." "Yes, if you have time later." Guochang fell silent. He was speechless. A cello specialty? A 17-year-old high school student who almost wiped out an entire border hunting group? Was this some kind of lame joke that was popular in the present world? "Are you done stalling for time?" Huaishur looked at his face and asked calmly, "Can we begin?" Guochang's expression changed. He gritted his teeth and suddenly said, "Lin Yu was used by someone. Someone told her your identity. Oh, and then?" Huaishur suddenly asked, "Is your next condition that I wait here with you for half an hour, and then you tell me that the surname of the person who used her is Yin?" Guochang's pupils contracted. "Wow, is that true? You're not lying to me, right?" Huaishur also raised his eyebrows in disbelief. She scrutinized his appearance, trying to discern if he was lying. But soon, he shook his head indifferently. "Forget it, it doesn't matter if you want to negotiate or if you're just trying to find a scapegoat to trick me. Anyway, everyone will have to settle the score in the end. I don't feel itchy when there are so many lice. But, how much money did the Lin family give you to work so hard?" "I just want to retire." Guochang shook his head and laughed self-deprecatingly. "Now it seems that it's most likely going to be reimbursed. After working so hard for so many years, you can't even rest when you want to. What a joke. Why sleep so long when you are still alive?" Huai Shi's eyes drooped, concealing the demonic light that was burning in his eyes. After death, he would naturally fall into eternal slumber. In that instant, the mountain ghost's cold light burst forth from the crack in his chest, and origin substance exploded. The ground beneath Guochang's feet suddenly cracked open. The chains that had been hidden in the ground shot out like snakes, coiling around his ankles and forcefully growing, binding him within an instant. The dark origin substance condensed into a tangible form of grief and rushed into his consciousness, transforming into a flood that drowned out all thoughts of resistance. At the same time, the shrinking chains forcefully suppressed Guochang's sage insignia, even if only for an instant. Huai Shi stepped forward. Emperor Yu's steps. The evil spirit pounced forward. Would grace. Guochang only remembered to roar with all his might. He swung his arm through the chains, and at the last moment, he threw the bomb in his hand towards his teammate. From the very beginning, he had never planned on following the contract. It was as if Huai Shi had never trusted him. The contract said that he had to throw the bomb away, but it didn't say that others couldn't pick it up. It was just as if Huai Shi had said that he would let Lin Yu go, but he hadn't said that she could leave in one piece. After working together for so many years, Guochang's teammates were already aware of his plans and intentions. During their brief conversation, they quietly prepared themselves, completely focused on waiting for the signal. Even if they all died here, it didn't matter. This was just a game. From the very beginning, their goal wasn't to win the championship. As long as they could stall Huai Shi here and kill him, even if they had to die together, they would still be able to turn the tables. Just as Wood Grace was about to throw himself at the bomb and activate it, the other tall and sturdy sublimator's body was already covered in blazing flames. He opened his arms and pounced towards Huai Shi, bringing with him a terrifying temperature. He passionately embraced him. As long as they could stop him for an instant, as long as they could slow him down even a little bit, their goal would be achieved. As such, the flames grew hotter and hotter, not hesitating to burn his own body. The sublimator swelled in size once again, roaring as it transformed into a wall of flames that pressed down on Guochang. Immediately afterwards, he finally saw Huai Shi raise his head. And his eyes. They were as calm as an abyss, quietly reflecting the raging flames in front of him. However, the flames were unable to illuminate the darkness, as if they had been completely swallowed up. All that was left was nothingness. Within the nothingness, the sound of tearing thunder could be heard. The ground beneath Huai Shi's feet suddenly shook, and countless dust particles flew into the air as he moved forward. They were wrapped in a hurricane, gathered together, and spun around with a twist of his wrist. His 5 fingers closed and burst forth with a thunderous roar, and they fled in all directions in panic. In that fleeting moment, the origin substance in Huai Shi's palm seemed to emit a blinding light. The heavens and earth acted as a drum, and thunder rumbled. Pure destruction was condensed in the vibration. With a punch, the wall of fire was torn apart as easily as dry weeds and rotten wood. The figure in front of Huai Shi flew backwards, disintegrating in the air. Blood and chi evaporated in his own embers, and the black ashes were torn apart by the hurricane, revealing the figure that leaped forward, and the heavy axe that was thrown forward as it spun. A sharp scream rang out. Muwen's fingers finally touched the bomb falling from the sky. In his ecstasy, he heard the sound of a skull breaking. He fell backward. Guochang roared with all his might, his arms struggling. Fang Liang's divine mark frantically extracted the origin substance on Huai Shi's chains, causing cracks to appear on the chains. As Guochang struggled with all his might, a gap appeared, allowing him to raise his hand. At that moment, Huai Shi had already passed by him. He staggered to a stop behind him, and a faint scarlet color appeared on the unsheathed virtue sword in his hand. Demon beheading. Guochang froze in place. Soon, he forced a smile. As the red mark on his neck spread, he silently left. Judge Jean landed on the ground. Victory and defeat had been decided. That was close. Huai Shi looked around at the mess around him, as well as the relics and props from the border scattered all over the ground. He tiredly found a flat rock and sat on it, panting violently. Only now did sweat drip from his face. After killing the last opponent, he felt exhaustion surge like a tsunami, gradually drowning him. It made him want to fall on his back and fall into a deep sleep. But there were still things to do, so he couldn't rest yet. So he propped himself up again, standing on the street and looking into the distance. He scratched his head in distress. Where did Lin Yu go? I accidentally talked too much nonsense, causing her to run a little too far. This is a little unreasonable. Shouldn't you be running 39 meters first, and then I'll be slashing from behind with a 40-meter-long broadsword? Why are you running so fast? Why don't you let me kill you? Huai Shi sighed regretfully, raised the virtue sword, and slashed at the void in front of him. Immediately, the white horse galloped out of thin air, still looking handsome. But after seeing Huai Shi, it indifferently took a step back and looked at him with vigilance. What did you call me for? Good brother, can you give me a hand? Huai Shi went up and rubbed his hands, wanting to negotiate. It's quite urgent, I won't lie to you. How about I invite you to my house to eat grass? It's all natural and pollution-free, enough for you. The white horse shook its head, expressing its refusal. Wow, didn't you say that the upright person should ride the white horse? Huai Shi was a little dumbfounded. He took out the virtue sword and reasoned. Brother, your condition is a bit high. Isn't it upright to avenge your teammate? But the white horse was still unmoved. It just looked at him with a pair of eyes full of disdain, obviously not believing a single word. Keep bragging, keep bragging. I'll be a fool if I believe a single word of yours. Under that pair of eyes that seemed to see through everything, Huai Shi gradually felt helpless. After a long time, he sighed dejectedly. Okay, I admit, it's not for revenge, at most, it's just for revenge. He raised his hands and admitted his mistake. It's all my fault for being too arrogant and being so hypocritical. I only regretted it after my teammate died to save me. I don't even have the chance to exchange sincerity for sincerity. So, big brother, please help me. I'm afraid there won't be such a chance next time. The white horse was silent and looked at him quietly. After a long time, its harsh eyes gradually softened. It lowered its head and poked Huai Shi's chest, then raised its head and patted his head as if to comfort him. When Huai Shi looked up, he heard it neighing and shaking its head forward. Its fluttering mane seemed to be beckoning. Okay, little brother, let's go. Huai Shi couldn't help but smile bitterly. So, the upright person should ride the white horse, is that what it means? It's not kindness, nor justice, but integrity. At least, don't lie to yourself. Face your own heart with integrity, right? Huai Shi reached out, took the reins, and jumped onto the horse. The white horse snorted and lowered its head obediently. It no longer had its usual arrogance and irritation. It obeyed his control and moved forward lightly. A sharp cry came from the sky. A crow circling in the sky flew over and landed on Huai Shi's shoulder. It jumped twice and cried loudly. You want to come too? Huai Shi raised his eyebrows and looked back. He saw countless pairs of blood-red eyes open on the countless withered branches and charred trees. They flapped their wings and shouted impatiently. Very good. Huai Shi nodded and whispered, Let's go. He laughed loudly, pulled the reins, and galloped away from the white horse. Behind him, countless pitch-black birds responded to the white horse's neighing and cried sharply. They opened their wings and flew up. Thousands of birds gathered in one place, surging like a tide, forming a pitch-black cloud in the sky. The ominous black cloud followed the white horse and swept across the sky of Yamatai City. It wasn't for the holy revenge, nor was it for the public's desire to punish the unjust. It was for the righteous revenge. The road of a tooth for a tooth had begun. Chapter 256. Following a sizzling sound, a putrid smoke rose from the alleyway. It was like sulfuric acid had been poured onto her body. Her flesh and blood quickly rotted and transformed, but then it was forcefully closed by some kind of cruel force and restored to its original state. Only a tragic scar was left on her smooth thigh. The intense pain lingered, causing Lin Yu's face to twitch in pain. She couldn't help but raise her head, suppressing the painful groans in her throat. Her eyes, which were already filled with madness, were bloodshot. In the midst of the intense pain, a crack appeared on the medicine bottle in her hand. She had almost crushed it. After a long, long time, she slowly relaxed and leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. That damned Yin family, that damned son of a bitch, and that damned bastard Yuan Zhao. She clenched her teeth and tore off the troublesome ring of discipline on her wrist. The uncontrollable hatred and resentment was already hard to control. A dark origin substance that even the creatures of the abyss couldn't compare to rose from her soul, dyeing the originally turbid color even darker. However, she was wild with joy. When she saw the flock of crows rising in the distance, she revealed a mocking sneer. She had escaped in the end. That son of a bitch couldn't kill her. This killing intent towards him and the hatred in her heart would only become resources for her to evolve into a snake after settling down. She would only become stronger. Once she got out of here, she would use all her strength to make that bastard pay the price. Not only did he steal her evolution materials during the Demon Chef tournament, but also the humiliation she experienced this time. She would pay him back 1,000 times over. She supported herself against the wall and staggered out of the alleyway, awkwardly moving forward. She was just a short distance away from safety. After escaping, she didn't hide nearby at all. Instead, she called for a taxi from Yamatai City and used the fastest method to escape half of the city. Unfortunately, the taxi could only go this far and wasn't willing to go any further. At the end of the street, a small fox was lying on the street lamp. Like an illusion, its petite body was translucent, lazily combing its fur. When it heard the sound, it raised its eyes and looked at the person who came. It was cold and indifferent. However, Lin Yu could not help but laugh. It was sharp and proud, and she could not wait to move forward. "Take me in." She raised the emblem of the Social Security Bureau in her hand and said loudly, "I am Lin Yu. Take me to see Yi Shuiya immediately." The little fox on the street lamp didn't move. She quietly stared at him. She didn't say anything and didn't refuse. Instead, she allowed him to move forward. She passed through the boundary and walked into the Ginza district that had already been turned into a fortress. After a long time, he coldly withdrew his gaze, closed his eyes and continued to doze off. Lin Yu's smile gradually stiffened. She staggered forward, but no matter what, she was still pacing back and forth on this street. Even if she ran with all her might, it was still difficult for her to walk out of the circular scenery. The high wall was clearly within reach, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get closer. The distance of 10 meters was as far as the abyss. In the end, she raised her head and saw the woman sitting on the edge of the high wall. She finally understood something and her face twisted. "Yi Shuiya, what are you trying to do?" Yi Shuiya didn't seem to hear. She was currently listening to music and smoking a cigarette. On the high wall beside her, there was a thick stack of comics. After she finished reading Mountain Thief King, she held a Barbarian King Detective Conan and read it with great interest. She was immersed in the plot and sighed. Only when she leisurely finished reading the last sentence did she close the comic. She raised her eyes and looked at Lin Yu, who wasn't far away. Her eyebrows slightly raised. "Oh, this is truly a rare guest." She grinned as she smoked. Looking at Lin Yu's face, she smiled. "Second miss, I'll have to trouble you to take care of that little brother of mine. Yi Shuiya, you want to use public office to avenge a private grudge." Lin Yu's expression twitched and became unsightly. "Our Lin family is one of the Eastern Summer families. Your Social Security Bureau wants to watch me get killed? Although I really want to see you get killed, you're mistaken about one thing." Yi Shuiya smiled as she raised a finger and shook it, The one who wants to see you get killed is not our Social Security Bureau, but me. Do you understand? She disdainfully flicked the cigarette butt down. It fell beside Lin Yu's feet and burst into a spark. Seeing that old Uncle Lin took care of me at the border, I won't kill you. She shook her head mockingly. Second miss, you should go find another place. Lin Yu clenched her teeth. Her expression changed. She wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything. She only turned around and staggered away. That's right, there's also, Yi Shuiya suddenly raised her voice and curiously asked, You didn't forget that this game has a live broadcast, right? When Lin Yu turned around with a gloomy face, she saw her gloating smile. The words you said about Yuan Zhao, perhaps it has already been spread? That little demon's uncle has a rather bad temper. You have to be careful. Lin Yu's expression became more and more unsightly. She gloomily looked at Yi Shuiya. She didn't say any nonsense like today's gift will be repaid in the future. She only swallowed this humiliation and turned around to leave. Very quickly, she disappeared at the end of the street. Tisk, was I seen through? Yi Shuiya regretfully shrugged her shoulders. I originally thought that I could stall for some time. In the end, I left so quickly that I missed a good show. She lowered her head and continued to immerse herself in the plot of barbarian King Detective Conan causing havoc in the winery. Very quickly, a low rumbling sound came from afar. Countless pitch-black birds covered the sky. Under the black clouds, a galloping white horse came to an abrupt stop in front of a high wall. On the horseback, Huai Shi looked around. In the end, he looked at the seemingly familiar ascender on the wall. Very quickly, he remembered the woman who fought with him over the dark gold item in the elevator. His expression became enlightened. Yi Shuiya? Yes, it's me. Yi Shuiya sized him up and nodded in praise. I haven't seen you for a few days and you've become like this, young man. Huai Shi didn't reply. He only raised his hand and threw the trident and a package over. These are Yuan Zhao's things. He told me to give them to you. Yi Shuiya hooked her finger and those things flew up and landed next to the manga beside her. After looking down, she couldn't help but shake her head. That child's mouth is stubborn and awkward. He also likes to play the hero and go into a dead end. I've troubled you these few days. He saved me. Huai Shi raised his head and told her seriously. At the last moment, he turned the tide. Yi Shuiya slightly raised her eyebrows, as if she was surprised. Very quickly, she smiled with gratification. That little brat, he still made quite a good friend. She went that way. Yi Shuiya raised her finger and pointed. Go out this way and head southwest. It's probably the area left by Shi. Her mother's family has some relations with Xinlu. She should be heading in the direction of the Seven Stars group, right? She paused for a moment and then revealed a nasty mocking smile. Unfortunately, she went too late. She rejoiced in his misfortune and sighed. 20 minutes ago, the people of the Seven Stars group had already been killed by Xiao Xian. How tragic! I say, do you have the confidence to defeat your senior sister? Huai Shi was stunned for a moment. He was immediately stumped by this question and helplessly shook his head. It's hard to say. Anyway, thank you. You're welcome. Yi Shuiya waved goodbye. Have a safe journey. Okay. Huai Shi turned his horse around and galloped in the direction of Shilu. Countless crows soared into the sky and turned into black clouds, guiding the white horse forward as if thousands of soldiers were surrounding and protecting it. What a pity! If only I met him at the border. Yi Shuiya quietly looked at his back. She couldn't help but rub her fingers together to suppress the unbearable itch in her heart. If she could meet such an outstanding opponent in another place, she would definitely be able to have a good fight, right? She regretfully sighed and immediately shouted at Huai Shi. Right, remember to come over later when you have time. I have something to talk to you about. Huai Shi didn't even turn his head back. She didn't know if he heard her or not. In the midst of galloping, the pitch-black hearse suddenly stepped on the brakes and came to a sudden stop on the side of the road. It almost threw off Lin Yu, who was cursing in the front passenger seat. "What's going on?" She angrily turned her head and glared at the driver. The street was clearly empty, there was no need to stop at all. "I told you, I'm in a hurry." "I'm sorry, customer." The driver with sunglasses turned his head stiffly and said in a stiff tone, "We just received a notice from the General Administration. Unfortunately, we will temporarily suspend service to you. You have to get off." "Why?" Lin Yu was furious. "I paid. We will compensate you 10 times the amount of money you spent." The driver of the hearse announced the notice from the General Administration. "Due to your public violence against a distinguished honorary citizen and the destruction of Ueno Park, one of the pride of Yamatai City, has caused an extremely bad impact. After a meeting and discussion, the Municipal Administration, Kitten Paradise, and the Monks Cultivation Society jointly issued an eviction order for you. The eviction order will take effect in 12 hours. From now on, all public services in Yamatai City will be suspended for you, including but not limited to taxis, meals, accommodation, and supply stores, etc." No one in the empty car was listening anymore. Before he finished speaking, Lin Yu had already pushed open the door and staggered away. She gritted her teeth in anger and ran awkwardly on the street. Her nails had already pierced her palms in shame. This damn place. Even a bunch of mutants from the border, who were destined to live under someone else's roof, didn't know how to appreciate kindness. In the dead silence, there was suddenly the sharp cry of a crow. When she suddenly turned her head, she saw a black bird on the roof. Its scarlet eyes reflected her pale face. She didn't know when, but countless crow had already landed on the roof. Like countless audiences, they entered the seats on time and quietly watched with their heads lowered. Their eyes were violent and cruel. They were waiting for the big show to start. Iron hooves hit the ground, and the sound of drums sounded from afar. Chapter 257. Sparks flew from the asphalt. The iron hooves trampled, and the sharp and sonorous sound burst out, tearing the dead silence. Above the vault of heaven, the crows roared like a tide. Lin Yu looked back blankly, staring at the crow tide that followed the white horse above the vault of heaven. The dark color rolled and surged in the sky, gradually pressing down. Those crimson eyes lowered their heads and stared at her, as well as the shadow that came from afar. There was a white horse galloping on the street, neighing loudly. The iron hooves trampled the ground, and sparks burst out between the iron and the stone, bringing bursts of thunder. "You damned!" Lin Yu's expression twitched and gradually became ferocious, but she could no longer make a sound. It was as if the outer shell of arrogance and wrath had been shattered. Amidst the approaching hoofbeats, they suddenly felt suffocated. What followed was a strong sense of uneasiness. No matter how she bit her fingers and lips, she couldn't relieve the uneasiness. Compared with the sharp sound in the distance, the pain seemed insignificant and not worth mentioning. She could stay in the same place and scold with hatred, or cast the curse resentment, but under the gaze and ridicule of countless crows, the shallow determination had disappeared without a trace before it emerged. She turned around, holding the wall, and staggered forward. She gritted her teeth in shame and suppressed the angry scream. There was no time to waste. She had to get out of here at all costs. Escape from this nightmare. First, she staggered forward, and then she ran awkwardly. She panted and ran hard, trying to get rid of the thunder that followed her like a shadow. However, the sound of iron hooves trampling on the ground continued to follow behind him at a moderate pace, moving forward slowly. Closer and closer, closer and closer, closer and closer, like the shadow behind her, it followed her step by step, showing a cold smile in the dark, and breathing viciously from behind her. Her expression changed, not knowing whether it was anger or fear. She clenched her fists. She should hide, but she couldn't help but scream and roar. She turned back and waved crazily. The divine mark of the snake danced, and the dark rain fell from the sky with the curse. In an instant the weak water froze everything. But at the end of the frozen street, the sound of horse hooves sounded again. Forward. Stepping on the ice and snow, he calmly stepped past the curse and continued forward. "I'll kill you, you son of a bitch!" Lin Yu staggered back with a twisted expression. "I will definitely kill you." She turned around and ran towards the building with the 7-star symbol engraved on its entrance. She staggered into the door and climbed up the stairs, almost using both her hands and feet. Finally, he used all his strength to close the door behind him, sealing himself in the library. In the dead silence, she breathed heavily and staggered forward. She raised the silver bracelet on her wrist toward the huge oil painting hanging at the end of the hall. "I'm Lin Yu," she said. "Let me in." The graceful lady in the oil painting raised her eyes and glanced around. Soon, the red carpet under her feet rolled down from the oil painting and extended to Lin Yu's feet. Lin Yu stepped onto the red carpet and used the last of her strength to walk forward. Step by step, she disappeared into the painting. When the hall behind her disappeared, Lin Yu no longer had the strength to support her body. She knelt on the ground and gasped for breath. Sweat dripped from her face and fell on the red carpet like tears after a disaster. Lin Yu's expression twitched as if she was angry, but she couldn't help but smile. She laughed silently, full of malice and madness. She was safe. She was still alive. "I'm a member of the Lin family." After a long rest, she finally got up from the ground and looked up at the man reading a book behind the table in the front hall. She was dissatisfied with his indifference and disregard, but she couldn't get angry because she was living under someone else's roof. There was no need to lower herself to the same level as these lowly people. She gathered her hair and said faintly, "Take me to see executively." The person reading the book didn't respond. He just looked down at the blank page in his hand, motionless as if he was frozen. There was a mysterious smile at the corner of his mouth. "Hey, did you hear that?" Lin Yu frowned and finally realized that something was wrong. She walked forward. "Take me to Sealy." Her voice stopped abruptly. She finally caught a glimpse of that drooping face. There was a thin red mark running across the entire face. It was as if it had been drawn by an extremely fine ballpoint pen. It was not noticeable at all. On the dull face, a frightened eye trembled and raised slightly. But as she stepped forward, the person reading the book suddenly trembled and split into pieces in front of Lin Yu. It was unknown whether it was the tremor of her footsteps or the breeze caused by her words. Countless bright red marks were cut open like flowers, revealing a cut that was as smooth as art. There was also a cross-section of the skin that was so smooth that it moved one's heart. Whether it was the internal organs, the bones, or even the brain and consciousness, they were all cleaved into two halves by the blade. Immediately after, they were frozen by a thin layer of frost and delicately glued together. But now, such a delicate connection was broken. It was like the first domino was pushed, triggering the collapse of the sequence. The collapse of death began, spreading inch by inch. Viscous scarlet spurted out from the broken leather bag, completely dyeing the entire table and the wall behind it red. At the last moment before his death, the ascendant let out a hoarse sigh. It was as if he was finally free. Full of gratitude, Judge Jean fell to the ground. Lin Yu looked at all of this in a daze, frozen in place. After a long time, she took a step back and covered her face. Feeling the smell of blood on her face, her expression twitched. She opened her mouth, wanting to scream, but she forcefully covered her mouth. Subconsciously, she took a step back and rushed into the inner hall, wanting to escape from this terrible nightmare. But when she pushed open the door, she was shocked by everything in front of her eyes. The originally gorgeous lounge was now like a painting, covered in layers of colors. Red, red, white, red, 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 and red. And there was a touch of ash that couldn't be ignored. Tragic blood and bones were violently thrown everywhere, and the terrifying traces left behind by the disappearance of life covered every inch of space. But what was even more terrifying was that death didn't come. On the ground, in the midst of the mess, There was a faint whining sound that came from the broken remains that couldn't be seen in the past. Fine ashes fell on the broken bodies, like a drizzle of fine snow. Under the contrast of the bright red, it was very dazzling. It was the ashes of a soul that had been completely burned. The dregs extracted from despair and death, the essence and most sincere wishes left behind when life fades away. Want to die. He had never wanted to die so badly before. Seeing Lin Yu come in, the broken bodies in the pool of blood wriggled with difficulty. Their broken eyes looked up, using all their strength to plead, as if they were expecting her pity. But Lin Yu didn't dare to move. She even forgot her fear and screams, forgot everything. She didn't know where she was. Her consciousness was empty. Her soul was frightened, hovering on the edge of collapse. She just blankly raised her head, staring at the end of the blood and ashes, at the slender figure lying on the sofa. Her posture was relaxed and stretched, peaceful and calm. Her eyes were closed, and her red lips were curved, like a sweet smile. It was as if she had fallen asleep. However, in the dead silence, there was a terrifying wave of origin substance gathering towards her. From this tragic ground full of blood in a trance, Lin Yu trembled and finally woke up from the endless nightmare. She couldn't help but want to cry. She knelt on the ground and trembled. What kind of monster was that? Subconsciously, she wanted to retreat. She trembled and collapsed on the ground. She crawled backward with her hands and feet, suppressing the urge to scream and go crazy. She used all her strength to escape to the world outside the door. Escape from this sudden nightmare. When she woke up, she realized that she had already escaped from the oil painting. She knelt on the ground, trembling. She used all her strength to scream, roar, and crazily scratch the people standing in front of her. She didn't know where she was or who she was. She only hoped from the bottom of her heart that she could welcome destruction. Calm down. Calm down. A familiar middle-aged man grabbed her hand and said in Shinlo language, "Why are you here? Where are Jiang and the others? Why didn't they respond to the signal?" "Dead, they're all dead. They're all." Lin Yu raised her head in a daze and looked at his face, as well as the 7 or 8 ascendants behind him. As if she had finally reacted, she grabbed his hand and said, "Save me, I'm a member of the Lin family. Jiang is my grandmother's student. I can give you money, you must save me, you must save me." "Miss Lin, please calm down." Li Chang frowned. Of course, he knew who Lin Yu was, but he didn't know what had happened, why she was here, and what was going on with Jiang and the others. "Please tell me what happened." But then, thunder sounded from afar. Amidst the singing of countless pitch-black birds, Lin Yu screamed in despair. "He's here! He's here!" She grabbed Li Chang's hand tightly and said, "Save me! I beg you!" At that moment, a shattering sound burst out from behind everyone. The tightly shut door suddenly shook. Immediately, it shattered into pieces under the enormous force. Countless fragments flew out. Soon after, countless black-colored birds turned into a tide that surged into the hall. They flapped their wings and sprinkled down blood-like black feathers. Under the intense light, iron hooves crushed the stairs as if they were flying. The white horse rode a mighty hurricane and rushed into the hall. It trampled a ascendant under its feet and crushed him into mud. It neighed. Thunder shook violently. It was just like what was said in the Holy Bible. The sky opened and there was a white horse. The rider held a knife and a sword, and a crown was given to him. His eyes were like flames. He wore many crowns on his head, and there were names written on them. He was dressed in bloody clothes. He came out and won again and again. Thus, the burning mountain ghost raised his face and smiled at her. "We meet again," he said. "Are you all right?" Despair descended here. Chapter 258. This is. Li Zhangxing turned his head with difficulty. Following the rumble of the shattering, he caught a glimpse of the burning knight on horseback and his sinister smile. Amidst the sound of thunder, he froze in place. What is this thing? No one responded. After the initial greeting, the white horse neighed. In this room that was too small for it, it unhappily raised its hooves and stomped down. From the loud noise, thunder burst forth again, trampling the nearby sublimator into mud. Then, it galloped forward again. The knight on horseback raised his weapon and slashed down with his sword from above, bestowing destruction. It was clearly a deathly silence mixed with rumbles and screams, but at this moment, it was as if the triumphant song of death was being played. The knight on the white horse stepped forward and silently slashed down with his sword and saber. He brandished his heavy axe and pierced with a resplendent brilliance. He moved forward unhindered. Like tearing apart layers of thin paper, he easily tore apart one life after another. There was no room for argument, no room for explanation, and no room for hesitation. This place had indeed turned into a battlefield, so all that was left was to fight to the death. Amidst the screams of his subordinates, Li Zhangxing shuddered. He finally caught a glimpse of the pair of scarlet eyes behind the burning jade fire, as well as the tyranny and darkness that filled them, like an abyss. In the next moment the white horse passed by him. A mournful howl burst forth in the air, and cold light intersected and overlapped. Relying on the white horse's high-speed charge, the cord that was difficult to support in the past was smoothly scattered out. In the crisp sound of Jin Xiaofeng landing on the ground, the knight who had charged to the end of the hall slowly turned his white horse around. The blood-stained white horse snorted and spat out 2 lines of blazing breath. Its iron hooves rubbed against the floor, bursting with sparks. Once again, it launched a charge. Death. Death swept over. As if sitting in a nightmare, Yuan Zhao woke up from his dream, gasping for breath in exhaustion. Then, he found himself lying in the infirmary. The white light above his head, the 4 bottle hanging on the shelf next to him, and the strange old man lying on the bed next to him. His heart like dead ashes, the old man leaned on the raised bed and stared blankly ahead, motionless. "You're awake?" Eldest cousin's bright smile appeared from the side. He lowered his head and looked at his stunned expression. He didn't care where he was and still had a cigarette in the corner of his mouth. After taking 2 puffs, he pulled over a trash can and flicked it inside. "Am I leaving?" It took a long time for Yuan Zhao to react. "Ah, that's right." The eldest cousin nodded. Because of the curse and the use of a forbidden technique, the damage to his origin substance was quite severe. After leaving the arena, he fainted. Thankfully, he'll be fine after a few days of rest. Oh, Yuan Zhao nodded as if he didn't fully understand. Soon after, he finally recalled what he had done. His eyes instantly became sluggish, and the expression he used to look at eldest cousin became somewhat uneasy. "I'm sorry I saw everything." Eldest cousin nodded, but he wasn't angry. He was just calm. He was like an eternal optimist. No one had ever seen him angry. He always looked like a cheerful big brother. But for some reason, when he stopped smiling, Yuan Zhao always felt a little scared. "Yuan Zhao, you shouldn't have gotten involved in Huaishi's matters," he suddenly said. "If you want everyone to treat you as an independent adult, you need to learn how adults do things. Adults need to pay attention to the pros and cons." His words caused Yuan Zhao's heart to sink layer by layer. Doing this will only cause friction between the Yuan clan and the Lin clan. In addition, you won't gain any actual benefit. This isn't a choice that a mature person should make. Yuan Zhao was silent for a long time. He gathered his courage and wanted to argue. But immediately afterwards, he saw a happy smile appear on eldest cousin's face. "However, if you're always a boring adult, you won't be able to make any friends, right?" Yuan Zhao was stunned. However, eldest cousin reached out and ruffled his hair. He roughly and directly praised, "In any case, as your older cousin, I still think that you handled this matter quite well. Handsome." Is that true?" Yuan Zhao stared at him in a daze, not daring to believe it. "Of course it's true. When you carried Huai Shi and broke out of the encirclement, you were really handsome. Eldest cousin nodded and patted him on the shoulder. Although what you did shouldn't be praised or approved, but you've grown up, Yuan Zhao. He smiled with relief. Yuan Zhao scratched his head in embarrassment. But then he suddenly heard hurried footsteps outside the ward, as well as the voices of nurses and doctors trying to stop him. He was stunned for a moment. As if he thought of something, his expression suddenly became uneasy. Eldest cousin's smile turned into one of schadenfreude. In short, there's still 5 minutes before your biological sister rushes in to beat you up. Before that, enjoy the revenge that your friend is offering for you. He picked up the remote control in his hand and turned on the TV. Finally, he patted the youth on the shoulder and turned to leave. The door closed. In the silence, Yuan Zhao raised his head in shock and looked at the scene that appeared on the screen. Pure white tiles, a wisp of steam gradually rising. Amidst the gentle music from the record player, a familiar and gentle voice sounded. After the soup has boiled for 10 minutes, the scallions, ginger, and garlic that we cut in advance can be put into the pot. A pair of dexterous hands held a bowl and gently put the ingredients into the pot. When he spoke, his voice was so gentle that it made one's throat feel greasy. It was as if every word was filled with 10 pounds of sugar. Pay attention to the chili at the end. Then, cover the pot. As I relax, listen to a song and feel the fragrance slowly spread. Let the restless soul find peace and settle in the kitchen. The figure with his back to the camera reached out and put down the probe of the record player. Then, a melodious song sounded in the narrow kitchen. Against the gentle smile of the young chef, it was like a new idol program, triggering the screams of countless young girls in the audience. In the end, as the soup pot tilted, a golden light emerged from the bowl. The light was so bright that it illuminated every pair of incredulous eyes in front of the screen. In the end, a soup spoon scooped out the battery and light tube from the inside and threw them into the trash can. Huai Shi's smile appeared in front of the camera. He held the fragrant soup bowl. Like this, a simple and appetizing diode cream soup is ready. Have you learned how to make it? What the hell am I learning? Yuan Zhao stared dumbfoundedly at Huai Shi, who was busy in the kitchen. He couldn't help but want to smash the remote control on the screen. What the hell is this? Is this how you take revenge for me? In the kitchen? Do you want to make a meal to eat your opponent to death, or to make your opponent laugh to death? In the live broadcast of the competition organizing committee, the camera slowly retreated, reflecting the busy kitchen. In the huge kitchen filled with a terrifying cold atmosphere, countless faint shadows wandered in it, busily running their own business and cooking dinner for the guests. Behind Huai Shi, the original head chef was strictly controlling every step of the process, instructing his subordinates to do their best to serve the guests who had arrived today. Thank you, Mr. Watanabe. Huai Shi thanked him politely. The kitchen is the territory of every chef. I didn't expect you to be willing to let me borrow it. It's okay, the chef with a cold expression said in his usual indifferent voice. After all, this is the first time our restaurant has accepted the request of a chef. Although your skills are a bit immature, your sincerity in cooking is worthy of your identity. I'm just an apprentice. Huai Shi smiled embarrassedly. You're welcome. With your current skills, if you participate in the competition, you should be able to get a high ranking. The chef said indifferently. Just based on the control of the fire, no one can compare to you. The way you cook like a symphony is also an eye-opener. After the two exchanged a few words, Huai Shi picked up the appetizer and left. He pushed open the kitchen door and walked into the empty living room. Finally, he slowly put the dish in front of the only guest. On the chair, the restrained Lin Yu's face was livid. It seemed that she had cursed until her voice was hoarse. She just glared fiercely at Huai Shi's face. That's it. She looked down at the dish and sneered hoarsely. With your mediocre skills, you want to show off your slight skill in front of an expert? Don't say that. A scholar who has been away for 3 days should be looked at with new eyes. I have improved a lot these days. Huai Shi smiled, lifted the lid of the soup bowl, and pushed the soup bowl in front of her. Please eat, madam. This soup is appetizing. Lin Yu's expression twitched as she tried her best to resist the shackles of the chains. However, an invisible force controlled her limbs, causing her to stiffly raise her hand to grab the soup spoon. With trembling hands, she reached inch by inch into the soup bowl. At this moment, the Een Soul's sacred mark, like an evil spirit, was entangled in her body. Relying on the suppression of the sorrowful rope, it took over her body and turned her body into its own vessel. It enjoyed the source of darkness to its heart's content and sang loudly. It was as if it had swallowed a spoonful of light. When the crystal-clear soup fell into her throat, Lin Yu trembled violently. She screamed and roared hoarsely. Countless cracks appeared on her face. The dust of the liberated, concentrated in the soup, flowed into her lungs. Pure peace, joy, and relief spread out like a tide of light, tearing apart the body eroded by darkness. It sizzled like sulfuric acid, bringing double pain to her body and soul from the inside out. The snake's sacred mark spasmed painfully, and many cracks appeared in an instant. How is it? Huai Shi rested his chin on his hand and smiled. He looked at her carefully drinking the soup he had made carefully. Not a drop was left. He smiled with satisfaction. Did you have a good appetite? Bah! Lin Yu opened her mouth and spat out sticky, blood-colored saliva. The saliva fell on Huai Shi's face and was lightly wiped away by a napkin. The smiling teenager raised his hand and snapped his fingers. A vague shadow stepped out of the kitchen with a plate and respectfully presented the first dish of tonight's dinner. It's a pity that the order of serving the dishes is wrong. The soup should be served later. Huai Shi sighed regretfully. It's my first time working in a big kitchen. I haven't cooperated with you before, so I'm a little slow. I'm sorry that your dining experience is discounted. What answered him was only sharp curses, as well as bone-deep resentment and hatred. Why are you so angry? Huai Shi looked at her calmly. He looked at her desperate struggle, trembling hands, and swallowing the dishes that were filled with endless anger into her mouth. There is a saying that the world kisses me, and I sing in return. Can you sing? In the dead silence, only painful screams could be heard. The essence of the ashes and the venom of the plague broke out in her body, bringing endless despair and madness, tearing her soul and reason little by little. But for some reason, in the silence, the screams were as melodious as a song. Huai Shi nodded in satisfaction and waved his hand. The side dish was presented. The white fish meat that emitted a faint burnt smell was dyed with a faint layer of dark green, which whetted one's appetite. This is the plague bassa fish that I just learned. Try it. There are about a dozen carefully cultivated variants. I believe that every bite will give you a different feeling. Kill me if you can. Trash. In the pain of her soul being torn apart, Lin Yu glared at Huai Shi. The corners of her eyes cracked, and a line of blood slowly flowed down. You don't even dare to kill someone? You good-for-nothing, son of a bitch! It should have been like this, but not now. Huai Shi crossed his fingers and gently placed them on the table. He looked at her convulsing face and told her word by word, Miss Lin, you hurt my friend. Although I feel that our true friendship may have lasted only for such a ridiculous moment, and that guy is stupid, Chunibyu, and likes to talk to himself. When he was about to die, I was really sad. So, this kind of sadness must be felt by you. As the poison and plague spread, countless spots and ulcers appeared on Lin Yu's face, making her twisted face even more ferocious and crazy. You will regret it, Huai Shi, you will. She screamed hoarsely and roared, after I leave here, everyone related to you will die. I know. Huai Shi nodded calmly. I believe that you can probably do it. Just like that, he accepted everything indifferently. I don't know why you have such confidence and superiority that you can kill someone if you want, but I think that you most likely want me to die. In the future, my life may be very troublesome." He paused and asked seriously, "Miss Lin, my life is already very troublesome, but I sincerely hope that it can be less troublesome. Do you understand what I mean?" "Bah!" Lin Yu sneered and spat at him with all her strength, but she didn't have the strength. The saliva fell on the plate, and with the knife and fork, it returned to her stomach along with the fish. It brought about indescribable pain. "It seems that you probably don't understand, but I understand what you mean." Huai Shi looked at him quietly, and her voice was as cold as ice. "Perhaps you grew up in a very good environment, or perhaps you were well protected. You think that everything in this world belongs to you, but some things are temporarily not yours." Huai Shi looked at him quietly. "That's why you've never understood one thing. Death is a very scary thing." He sighed softly. "So, you don't know how much I don't want to die." Huai Shi waved his hand, and the waiter in the corner came forward respectfully. He held the red wine in his hand and poured a line of scarlet into the wine glass. The wine with the smell of rust was so sticky. "Don't you want to kill me? You can't wait to eat my flesh and drink my blood?" Huai Shi raised the wine glass and looked at the scarlet surging within. "It's actually very simple. You just have to say it." Immediately afterwards, as Lin Yu's eyes widened, the red wine that accompanied the meal was slowly placed in front of her. Countless vicious origin substances brewed within, evolving into a red murderous intent. It was so dazzling. "Drink, this is my blood." The youth smiled, but his expression was as fierce as a demon's. He snapped his fingers, and the head chef pushed open the kitchen door. He carried the final main dish and walked forward. He carefully placed a steak in front of Lin Yu and sprinkled it with black pepper sauce and spices from the abyss. On the warm iron plate, the rich aroma of meat spread out. It was so tempting. But in the eyes of the witch, it was like the deepest disaster. The malice and darkness within had already spread into the air, enveloping the entire restaurant in an ominous shadow. "Eat, Lin Yu." Huai Shi smiled and looked at her. "Your wish has come true." Lin Yu trembled, and her expression twisted. As if she was looking at a madman, she stared at Huai Shi's face, unable to hide her fear and despair. You, madman. You actually," she used all her strength to scream and resist her body, but her hand still futilely picked up the scarlet wine and slowly poured it down her throat. The killing intent, anger, despair, and darkness that was so dense that it condensed into substance spread out from her body. Inch by inch, it tightened her last bit of reason and broke her last defense, causing her to be swallowed up by the malice of the abyss. In despair, she let out a sorrowful cry. A tragic crack appeared in her soul. "Let me go, I beg you, kill me!" She could no longer hold back her weak tears. She sobbed and begged, "Don't let me eat this kind of thing. To be honest, I'm not good at dealing with opponents like this." Huai Shi looked at her crying face and slowly shook his head. "But fortunately, I reluctantly learned some good points from a friend who was more cruel and harsh. Although she sometimes said things that were not very nice to hear, she was actually a very good person. She taught me a lot of things, for example, as long as I'm worse than the bad guys, no one can hurt me anymore." It was as if it was a matter of course. In the dead silent venue, under the dull gazes of countless people, on the big screen, the handsome young man casually picked up the knife and fork and helped her to divide the main dish on the plate. When he spoke, his tone was calm and steady, with a solemn and indisputable coldness. "So, from today onwards, you have to learn to tremble when you think of my name, cry when you see my face, and kneel on the ground to repent when you hear my voice." As if announcing fate, Huai Shi looked at her face and said to her word by word, "Because you made me your enemy." Dead silence. In the deathly silence, even the sound of choking sobs disappeared in the suffocation of despair. Only Huai Shi's voice spread in the silence, gentle and warm. 1 year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, you may grow up and become more reasonable. You may have a new life. But when you open your eyes every day, you have to live in this nightmare forever, as long as I'm still alive in this world. In front of the table, the woman trembled involuntarily. She was swallowed by the chill from the bone marrow, but she could not make a sound. The steak full of malice was picked up by the fork and brought to her lip. So, eat, Lin Yu, this is your fate. Huai Shi bent down and whispered in her ear, let's fight to the death. So, in the live broadcast of the organizing committee, under the witness of countless stunned and in awe, the tyrannical banquet that belonged to the devil finally ushered in the climax of lamentation. Chapter 259. The banquet ended in a jubilant atmosphere. It could be said that both the guests and the host enjoyed themselves. All of Huai Shi's dishes were happily eaten by the guests, not leaving a single bite behind. They clicked their tongues in wonder, vigorously praising Huai Shi's cooking skills and offering their own praise and admiration. As if Huai Shi didn't know whether the guests were happy or not, but as a chef, Huai Shi was quite happy. Happy and joyful. Before Lin Yu left, he gave her a lot of coupons and told her that she could continue to eat for free the next time she came. As for whether she was happy or not, no one knew. Towards the end of the meal, she no longer cried or roared. In fact, she didn't even make a sound. She didn't cry or laugh. She only liked to be quiet and didn't like to make a fuss. It was as if she had undergone a lobotomy for free. She opened her mouth with empty eyes and finished the plate that was brought to her. Finally, after finishing the dessert, she welcomed the corrosion of the origin substance that erupted from within her. She finally left. Sorry for the inconvenience. Huai Shi took off the white towel on his arm and waved it in his hand, treating it as a way to send off the guest. Then, at head chef Watanabe's invitation, he returned to the kitchen and joined the lively staff as they ate. The chefs exchanged their cooking skills. In the end, they even made a fortune smoothie for everyone to digest after the meal, receiving unanimous praise from the crowd. Just as they finished eating, a burst of flames suddenly shot out from the kitchen stove. A figure in a suit climbed out, his face covered in dirt as he coughed a few times and wiped the dust off his face. Sorry. He looked at the head chef. Is there a Mr. Huai Shi here? HM? Huai Shi, who was slurping his soba noodles, turned around in surprise. Seeing the visitor, he coughed a few times and walked over politely. He bent his waist and bowed 90 degrees, respectfully handing over his name card with both hands. Secretary of the Chef Demon Tournament's Organizing Committee? Huai Shi was stunned. You're looking for me? To be exact, I'm here on behalf of the Cooking Demon Competition's Organizing Committee. I'm here to send you a notice. Without raising his head, the visitor continued to maintain a 90-degree bow. He took out a rather quaint and serious letter from his briefcase and presented it with both hands. He opened the envelope and a black card slid out. Huai Shi's origin substance fluctuations were also imprinted on it. It was obvious that it had been specially crafted. What is this? Your identification. The secretary of the Cooking Demon Competition announced solemnly. The organizing committee praised your outstanding performance and unanimously approved your promotion. Your talent and skills no longer need to be verified by the competition. You have used real actions to promote the essence of dark cuisine and showed your excellent talent as a cooking demon. Congratulations, Mr. Huai Shi. From today onwards, you are a genuine cooking demon. Before Huai Shi could react, head chef Watanabe, who was beside Huai Shi, suddenly stood up and applauded enthusiastically. Then, the 2 chefs, the 4 assistant chefs, and all the restaurant staff stood up and looked at him with surprise and envy, applauding and praising. Yo 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 yo! Huai Shi-ku! Head chef Watanabe, who had a cold personality, grabbed Huai Shi's hand and congratulated him warmly. He was so happy that his face turned red, as if he had seen a child from his village get admitted to Peking University. He was even more excited than Huaishur. Why AI, 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 AI. Yeah, 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 yeah. Everyone surrounded Huaishur in the middle, applauding and praising with congratulatory smiles. Huaishur was so scared that he suddenly felt like the whole human race had turned into orange juice. Why are you guys even happier than me? In order to celebrate Sophia's promotion to a cooking demon in his kitchen, Watanabe had his apprentice take out a bottle of sake from his collection and opened it. He invited the secretary who came to inform him, and everyone had a few drinks together. Huaishur was pleasantly surprised. He didn't know how the sake was brewed, but it was actually rich in the vitality of a large number of plants. There were also dozens of abyssal plants that Huaishur had never felt before. After drinking a small cup, his old wounds were healed. He sighed happily. The head chef glanced at his apprentice, and the apprentice knowingly sat next to Huaishur and poured the sake for him. The secretary was not like Huaishur, who couldn't even taste it. After taking a sip, he was pleasantly surprised. Could this be a treasure of Tengu Mountain? It was given to me by the head chef when I was studying. The head chef smiled reservedly. Now that I'm about to leave, I didn't expect to encounter such a happy event. Drinking it here is not a waste of this bottle of good wine. After Huaishur took a sip, how could he not know that it was a good thing? He didn't dare to drink more. Speaking of which, if it wasn't for Mr. Kitten's phone call just now, I wouldn't have known that I had received your help. The head chef nodded and said, although it's inconvenient to say more about the reason, please drink to your heart's content. This is what you deserve. Huaishur was dumbfounded as he held the wine glass. Although he didn't understand what had happened, he was treated to drinks for free, so drinking was the right thing to do. But he still couldn't react. I'm a culinary demon now? Oh, your heroic bearing in the competition is really the first time I've seen it in my life. Please don't belittle yourself. The secretary respectfully toasted and then introduced, with that card, you can rent a kitchen at any time in the present realm, the border, or even any place in hell, free of charge. If you choose to open a restaurant at a fixed location, the restaurant you are in will automatically be certified by the Mouth of Hunger. And you can eat for free in most restaurants in all of hell. No, it should be said that most restaurants are happy to entertain a culinary demon like you. Speaking of the benefits of the card, the secretary suddenly gushed. His Excellencies Hannibal and the Butcher of Heaven have greatly praised your performance, praising your talent and your boundless future. Especially since you are also a disaster musician, a legendary investigator, and... He paused and suddenly looked up at the surroundings, as if confirming that there were no cameras around, then he lowered his voice and said, You are of the Abyss genealogy, right? Huaishur was stunned and immediately felt a little uneasy. Is there a problem? I'm ashamed to say this, but my cousin's aunt's second son's colleague asked me to pass on a message to you. The secretary lowered his voice and whispered in his ear, There is also a great future in the abyss, forget it. Huaishur waved his hand decisively, his expression becoming serious. How could he not understand what the secretary wanted to say? In this world, the only thing that could tell at a glance that he was of the celestial genealogy was probably the golden dawn formed by everyone's collective solidification after falling into the abyss, apart from the remnants of the utopia. How could he dare to have anything to do with these bad guys? There was a lot of shameful things under his butt, and he was still a remnant of the kingdom of heaven. Just offending the rancher was enough. If he got involved with another destructive factor, he was afraid that he would not die quickly enough. And the secretary did not forget his duty. After mentioning it once, he did not mention it again. After drinking, the secretary climbed back into the flames of the stove and disappeared. Huaishur simply stayed in the staff dormitory of the restaurant. The apprentice specially cleaned up a room for him, and he enjoyed the VIP treatment. Then he opened the restaurant at midnight to make supper for the ghosts who had finished their night tour. Sure lay on the bed, drowsy, and looked at the card in his hand over and over again. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration, and a bold idea came to him. The certificate of the culinary demon allowed him to eat for free in the abyss, then the certificate of the disaster musician would be. In the middle of the night, in the old house, the hall was brightly lit. On the seat of honor, the old man who had dozed off was awakened. He sleepily raised his eyes and saw that the hall was full of people. There was also a wheelchair pushed up, and Lin Yu in the wheelchair was in a daze. The old man raised his eyes slightly, and a trace of understanding flashed through his cloudy eyes. Xiao Yu? You don't even recognize your great-grandfather? He smiled indifferently. To come back in such a defeated state, it's really outrageous. Forget it, it's already so late, so let's not do anything else. Everyone, go and rest. The others immediately understood and were already used to it. They got up and prepared to leave. Only the woman holding the wheelchair still raised her head unwillingly and wanted to say something. Grandpa, then this matter, is it over? Otherwise? The old man laughed strangely. Is she not my great-granddaughter just because she is your biological daughter? When your man was sent back with broken legs, did I say anything? The woman's expression froze. The old man continued to ask, I have 7 grandsons. Other than your man and third brother, aren't there 4 dead brothers my grandsons as well? The woman's face was pale. Even though she had heard about it, it was still difficult for her to accept such a cold end. But that person in the live broadcast. That's why it said that a loving mother leads to a useless son. It's all nonsense. The old man sighed regretfully and shook his head. Since I can remember, I have 7 uncles. Only one can live until now. I have 14 brothers. Only little 8 and I can live until now. I'm the only one who can reach the 5th level. You only have one daughter, and she's not dead, is she? She's perfectly alive, you know. If you ask me, little Qin, you should be happy. There was no indifference or alienation in his words. Rather, it was a kind of seriousness that was almost as if he was telling the truth. No one could refute him. The woman was stunned. The old man raised his head and seemed to be a little more awake. His vague voice became clearer. Since everyone is here today, I might as well say a little more. He looked around at his heirs and nodded. Among you, some are ascendants and some are not. Some have enemies outside, and some haven't left the house. Those who haven't returned are either dead or seeking death. You're all very hard-working children. Very good. The Lin family has always been like this since ancient times. That's right. You've been doing all kinds of evil things outside. He asked, Is there anyone else who doesn't know that the Lin clan is crazy? There was a burst of laughter. When the few people sitting at the front heard the words of this family head, they laughed without any scruples and nodded their heads in agreement. That's right. The old man patted his knee in satisfaction, and his gloomy eyes lit up with an intimidating glow. If you want to become a torch dragon and pursue the power of this path of sublimation, you should be like this. If you don't attract hatred, how can you convert origin substance? If you don't provoke trouble, how can you obtain the fruit of sin? Do you want to help me cross the road and do good deeds? Below, the wanton laughter became louder and louder. Without any hesitation, dozens of pitch-black origin substance fluctuations soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, they swallowed all the stars at the border, covering the sky and darkening the earth. But in the darkness, the old man's turbid eyes were as piercingly cold as the scorching sun, emitting a tyrannical light. His hoarse voice reverberated in everyone's ears, like a hammer hammering a nail, hammering his words into their souls word by word. Remember, you have to choose your own path, whether you're here or not, whether you're surnamed Lin or not. From the first day you set foot on the path of Torch Dragon, don't think about being an idler who doesn't cause trouble. You have to fight, snatch, and seize. You have to make enemies. You have to be beaten until you crawl back like a dog. You can take revenge after you have digested it. You can be a witch and collect abyss sediment, or you can be a spell master and go to hell to steal by force. This is the path you have chosen, a path with no chance of survival. Those who are afraid can go to the back of the mountain at any time and use the lightning tribulation secret instrument to wash off the sacred mark. You can take the money and go to the present world to be a rich second generation. In the future, don't say that you are a member of the Lin family. To them, being associated with this kind of family is a big misfortune. But what about you? What is the Lin family to you? The old man's eyes were like the sun shooting out flames, and his voice shook the entire border. Let me tell you, the Lin family is your life-saving talisman. With this life-saving talisman, you can provoke trouble as much as you want outside. Nothing is taboo. As long as you can escape back home alive, the elders will let you live. If you can crawl back up, lick your wounds and go out to do whatever you want. If you can't crawl back up, just shut the door and be a good-for-nothing. The Lin family is a big family, they don't lack your food. I don't know how many times I have told you this since you were young, but I ask you now, if you die outside, what will you do? Facing the old man's question, a teenager below raised his voice and answered, You will die for nothing. That's right. The old man clapped his hands in satisfaction and praised, Little 19 has a brain. Yes, you will die for nothing. A good-for-nothing who can't even go back home, you will die for nothing. Don't think that the family will avenge you. The family won't even pay for your coffin. You don't even have the eyesight to do evil. This kind of disgrace is better to die as soon as possible. If you want to be a member of the Lin family, this is your life. Do you all understand? Understood. Everyone in the hall responded in unison. Very good, then do what you should do. The old torch dragon nodded slowly. It is not easy to go back home. You all should go and conserve your energy. Then, you can go to any damn place to kill and set fire. You all have a great future. As for Xiao Yu, he pondered for a moment, raised his eyes to look at his granddaughter-in-law, and slowly shook his head. Her soul is damaged. Send her to the abyss. Whether she can rise again after being broken will depend on her luck. Since she is back, as her great-grandfather, I will take responsibility for the Yuan family. You don't have to worry. The woman holding the wheelchair trembled, not knowing whether it was out of excitement or fear. After a long time, she lowered her head and did not say anything else. The old man closed his eyes and fell into a long sleep again. Then, the world darkened. Chapter 260. The next day, early in the morning. The restaurant will be closing soon. I wish you a safe journey. Chef Watanabe walked Huai Shi to the door and gave him a special lunchbox from his restaurant. He also gave him a business card. After we move, the restaurant will be able to open a takeout service. I shouldn't be so presumptuous, but you don't look like you can cook very diligently. If you need anything, please help us. Of course, of course. Huai Shi took the business card with both hands. When he saw the logo of yesterday's courier, his eyelids twitched. Once the name of yesterday's courier was on it, no matter how far it was, it would definitely be delivered on time. However, the price would probably double like a space elevator. However, if it was necessary, it would be worth it even if the price was doubled. Last night, during the staff dinner, Chef Watanabe showed him the secret recipe he learned from Tengu Mountain, the Fenghe style. The name sounds scary, but it's actually a cooking method of stewing. Tengu Mountain stew was mixed with a large amount of negative origin substances. It also used wine as a medium to boil all kinds of precious abyss medicinal herbs into a pot of soup, forming a wondrous stew. The wonder and subtlety of this method were not inferior to any alchemy. Not only could it quickly heal people's injuries, but it could also bring about a long-term blessing of up to 12 hours. Depending on the ingredients, it could make people energetic, not afraid of cold or heat, not tired, and immune to deep corrosion, etc. Even without the identity of the cooking demon, Watanabe's skills were obviously far superior to Huaishi's. He also opened a new door for Huaishi on the road of dark cuisine. The cooking demon was just the beginning. There was still a vast world waiting for him to explore, although he really didn't intend to spend more effort on cooking. Watanabe of course also saw it, otherwise he wouldn't have been so presumptuous. As early as breakfast, he had already hinted that if Huaishi was interested, he might as well drink this cup of residual cough. He might as well go to Tengu Mountain. The recommendation letter was not a problem. In the end, Huaishi declined. As a senior, he certainly felt that it was a pity, but he also understood that for a young talent like Huaishi, dark cuisine was not a lifelong goal worth striving for. While reluctantly saying goodbye, he also handed over the business card of the future store, hoping that he could help him in the future and form a good relationship with him. This favor could not be said to be unshakable. Huaishi firmly accepted it and nodded his head in farewell. A rare smile appeared on Watanabe's usually serious face. After sending Huaishi off, Watanabe returned to the shop and ordered his apprentices to pack up. Not long after, a Hirata truck arrived at the door and drove them all the way to Kitty Paradise. Only an empty storefront was left in its original place. On the other hand, Huaishi rode on his white horse, holding the hand-drawn map given to him by the head chef. He swayed all the way to the direction of the city's music hall. There, he should be able to meet people from the Hell's Music Union. Hopefully, they would be able to find a good luthier there. Even now, he was still thinking about his old zither. After spending such a long time together, to Huaishi, it was not so much a zither as an old friend that had always been by his side. If he could restore it to its former state, he definitely wouldn't hesitate to make a trip. Even if he returned empty-handed, it would only be a waste of time. In addition, he would take a moment or two to touch the trees and plants on the side of the road, as if he was playing with a cat or a dog. Occasionally, he would touch a new species, and he would be happy for half a day. This was the instinctive joy that the mountain ghost sacred mark brought him, a sense of accomplishment. As the origin substance became more and more mixed, the chaotic life force within it became more and more exuberant. There was order in the chaos, just like in a deep forest. Even if it grew wild, it had its own rules. With every new strand of life force, Huaishi's origin substance became more and more lively. In the end, it seemed as if it had a life of its own, constantly leaping about. Wherever the white horse passed, it would leave behind traces of grass and shrubs on the asphalt road. Huaishi was planting grass everywhere. Now, he finally understood how the mountain ghost sacred mark grew. It was like illegally raising funds. Its origins were complicated, and there were many of them, but the most important thing was the circulation. By connecting with different networks, it ensured that there was a balance between the flow of profit. In the present realm, there was the suppression of the three great restrictions, so he couldn't run rampant. However, in the infernal realm, there was only the heart-pleasing framework. There was no way to defend against this strange method of life force circulation. During his battle with the prince, he had also discovered a new method, which was to connect the life force within his body with the surrounding life force network, creating a distributed server effect for a short period of time. To put it simply, Huaishi's life force was like some kind of colorful website that couldn't be seen by children. Its life force was as exuberant as a poisonous plant. In this state, the damage from piercing wounds and blunt blows from heavy weapons would be greatly reduced. If you wanted to kill him, you would have to destroy his vitals or forcefully dismember his corpse. Otherwise, if one of his servers was temporarily sealed, as long as he transferred out a strand of life force in advance, he would be able to preserve his most precious seed and sprout again after the limelight passed. Yes, as long as he could pay back the losses from his illegal fundraising in a short period of time, he would be safe and sound. From the looks of it, the illegal organization operation, skill seemed to be becoming more and more important. Huaishe rubbed his chin with one hand and carelessly stroked the flowers and plants with the other. His mind wandered and his thoughts wandered, leisurely enjoying the tranquil morning. If one ignored the constant rumbling and faint screams in the distance, they would not be able to escape. Huaishe estimated that he had collected about 1,000 different types of life force, and he was about 3,000 or 4,000 away from the mountain ghost sacred mark's completion. Although the lack of numbers was slightly shocking, it was actually the easiest to deal with. Although the abyssal plant species were not considered common goods, they were cultivated by all major organizations. Not to mention the Survival Institute, which claimed to gather all forms of life in the world, the Stone Cauldron Society, which monopolized all kinds of alchemy materials and claimed to cultivate 10 subspecies every day, the Milky Sea Fragment, which grew all things in the Indian genealogy, and so on. Just the borders that produced unique abyssal plants were countless. The Eastern Summer genealogy had 3 borders that were exclusively used by the alchemists of the genealogy for their daily need. For Huaishe, this was not the most difficult. Even if he wanted to find precious species, he would just have to spend a little more money and time. Moreover, he was not buying. He just wanted to take a look and touch it. Was that not okay? He was already prepared to go whore. Therefore, the most difficult thing was the next advancement. According to Crow, he could choose what he wanted. For Huaishe, there were as many as 3 advancements he could choose from. The simplest one was not to pursue the quality of the source substance. He could eat as much as he wanted and rely on the quantity of pure vitality to break through the barrier. He could transform the same kind of vitality into a qualitative change and naturally advance. He did not need the assistance of other border relics, nor did he need the transformation of secret instruments. However, after this advancement, his stigmata would break away from the celestial genealogy and turn into a hidden path of sublimation of the Eastern Summer genealogy. In the end, he could still reach the 5th level and become the Azure Emperor. There was still room for further advancement. However, by doing this, he would not be considered a member of the celestial genealogy. It was equivalent to everyone sharing a portion of their belongings and returning to the old Gao village to live their own lives. It was hard to say whether the Book of Destiny would still recognize him as a clerk at that time. Although Huaishe had always had a headache about some of the things that the Book of Destiny represented, if he were to let it leave him now, he still chose to hug the Book of Destiny and shout that it was so fragrant. He had been on the pirate ship for so long, why bother? Although there was a black-hearted crow who often made him bleed, he really couldn't do it if he wanted to cut him in half. Besides, wasn't the celestial genealogy pretty good too? Everyone in the genealogy was talented, and the crow spoke very well, so he quite liked it here. Thus, Huaishe could only pass on this option and consider the other 2 advancements. In the celestial genealogy, Huaishe's path of heavenly inquisition had many branches. Among them, the first stage, spirit ceremony, was the foundation. After entering the second stage, there was a divergence. The 2 advancements corresponded to the Mountain Ghost and River Earl. When these 2 advancements entered the 3rd stage, they would also have to face a new choice. Xiang Jun or Young Master of Fate? If the advancer chose the former, there would be a difference. If it was a man, there would be no change, but if it was a woman, there would be an additional choice called Lady Xiang. According to the Crow, River Earl's advancements were Xiang Jun, while Mountain Ghost's advancements were Young Master of Fate. However, as the celestial genealogy was extremely versatile, both Mountain Ghost and River Earl could freely choose between the 2. They both had their advantages and disadvantages. As the name implied, Xiang Jun was the legendary Xiang water god. It was a pure soul that was born in the water, and could greatly increase the user's affinity with water. It was invisible when it entered the water. Its specialty was that its origin substance capacity was monstrous, and as long as there was a large amount of water, the user could quickly replenish their origin substance. If River Earl advanced to Xiangjun, he would also gain an innate skill called canopy. Not only would his ability to control water greatly increase, but his origin substance capacity would also explosively increase. Even if his own attack power wasn't high enough, he wouldn't have to worry about using all kinds of border relic. As long as he found a few pieces of high-quality equipment, he would be able to become a Tier 3 DPS demon. If Huaishur advanced as a mountain ghost, although he wasn't as orthodox as River Earl didn't have the ability to coexist with plants like a mountain ghost. If Huaishur obtained the ability to replenish his origin substance through water, combined with the innate skill of replenishing his HP through plants, as long as there were plants and water around him, he would be an undying cockroach with full HP and MP. After making up for his shortcomings, his overall endurance would increase to a frightening degree. In fact, if he was a bit more cruel to himself and advanced to Lady Xiang, he would gain a powerful control skill called entanglement. As long as the enemy was in the water, they would find it difficult to move, and the weaker ones would drown on the spot. It was quite powerful. But without a chicken, what was the point of all this? Chapter 261. Therefore, when Crow said that she had a bold idea, Huaishur immediately picked up the axe and the broadsword, forcing her to take back the bold idea. Next was the direction that Huaishur had been working towards, the orthodox evolution of the mountain ghost, young master of life. With the mountain ghost laying the groundwork, Huaishur was too lazy to flip the table this time. According to the legends, young master of life was also a woman. And after some research, Huaishur found that she was not just a goddess. To put it simply, she was the guardian of children, but if you dug deeper, you would find that she was a fertility goddess. I won't ask why you want me to evolve into a child-giving guanyin. Huaishur sighed on the horse. But a god with such a long history and high status can't possibly be a third-order god, right? Among all the sacred marks that Huaishur knew, all the sacred marks that had divinity were all fourth order and above. Even without mentioning the gap between third order and fourth order, how could an orthodox god be reduced to third order? You're ignoring another thing, and that is that sacred marks are sacred marks, and gods are gods. Crow's voice sounded in his ear. It's only called that because it originated from young Master of Life, and not young Master of Life herself. Moreover, young Master of Life does not simply represent fertility. You're a young man full of vigor, can't you find a girlfriend early and stop thinking nonsense in such a place? Don't interrupt me. Huaishur saw through her purpose of rambling. Go on, young Master of Life. All right. Crow sighed. Since ancient times, whether it's the West or the East, which region, which genealogy, which source book, most of the representatives related to life have been women. You can understand this, right? Just like the snake represents sublimation, and the moon represents the soul. This is a corresponding relationship that you should have established when learning alchemy. Don't make me make up lessons for you. You're saying that women are just a symbol. More than that, Crow said flatly. Young arbiter of life's sacred mark doesn't represent fertility but the birth of life. Don't confuse the two. On the other hand, the guardian of the child could be understood as the child of God. What do you mean? Huaishur was stunned for a long time. There are many places where children can see gods, and children's eyes can see things that adults can't, right? Crow said slowly. Pure origin substance is similar to the nature of the gods in a certain way, Huaishur. The reason why this stigmata is called young arbiter of life, other than its connection with the life domain, is because it has at least reached the pure domain that only fourth-grade stigmatas can reach. Huaishur was stunned for a long time before he was overjoyed. In other words, if I become a young arbiter of life, I can obtain part of the god's characteristics. In your dreams, the crow sneered, compared to a real god, what you have is not even comparable to a single cell. At best, it's only comparable to a single strand of mycoplasma. You'd better not think too much about it. It's too insignificant to bring you any benefit. But the most important thing is often not the amount, but the difference between having and not having. Do you understand? Huaishir thought for a moment and vaguely understood. Sometimes, even the difference between 0 and 0.0000001 was as huge as the gap between heaven and earth. That's why I suggest that you consider this advancement option. Crow said, although your combat strength won't have an earth-shattering change like Xiangjuan, if you choose this advancement, when you step into the 4th stage, you won't be stuck like other ascenders. Do you understand? A great future, right? Huaishir sighed. Someone told me about it last night. Not only that, Crow said, advancing to the 4th stage requires not only the right time, the right place, and your own foundation, but also the transformation of your soul. At that time, your soul will completely merge with the stigmata, and there will be no distinction between the two, completing a complete qualitative change. If my guess is correct, the young arbiter of life stigmata is one of the stigmata that is most compatible with your confining hand. You won't have any trouble at this stage. Huaishir was puzzled. The confining hand and the young arbiter of life were compatible? One was the transformation between metal and origin substance, and the other was the birth and transformation of life. How could they be compatible? There's no point in saying this now. You'll understand when the time comes. Crow shook his head. Finally, the young arbiter of life's advancement is the most suitable stigmata for the Nibelungen ring in the celestial genealogy, apart from the dusk road. Is it suitable for creating toolmen? Huaishir was puzzled. It doesn't feel very useful. It's pretty strong when it's sent to self-destruct, but other than that, it feels very ordinary. Could it be that there's a setting to unlock new functions? Crow sighed, disappointed that Su Churn had failed to live up to his expectations. Fine, this thing is screwed in your hands. This idiot had never thought that when he was a mountain ghost, he could raise 3 souls. When he became a young arbiter of life, not only would the number of troops increase from 3 to 5, but he could also raise the souls into mountain ghosts, and have each mountain ghost bring 3 souls with them. And when he reached grade 4 and upgraded the Nibelungen ring, the number of troops under his command would increase from 5 to 10, and the 10 mountain ghosts would evolve into young arbiter of life. At the same time, each mountain ghost would have 5 mountain ghosts, and the mountain ghosts would, back then, the Dusk Road was known as the most shameless ascension road in the celestial genealogy. It relied on this kind of spending money to increase the number of people, okay? You've profited greatly. Crow wasn't willing to say any more, and Huaishir didn't pursue the matter. After knowing that young arbiter of life wouldn't turn him into a woman, he felt relieved, and immediately began to worry about the materials needed for the ascension. Not only were there all kinds of abyss oddities and border relics needed for the ascension ritual, there was also a long list of things that made Huaishir's wallet twitch and a bunch of to-do items. This time, Crow said, "You're already a mature idiot. You need to learn to do your own ascension." She didn't care about anything other than hosting the ascension ritual when the time came. And if he wanted to do all this, Huaishir would either have to spend 3 years running around to collect all kinds of things, or he would have to prepare a small gift and spend money to solve the problem. Spending money was impossible, so Huaishir could only hold his wallet tightly and prepare to run around the realm, the border, and the various hells. But some of the materials still required luck, and there were even more things that were completely incomprehensible. For example, the first of the most difficult prerequisites. What the hell is the birth of life? Huaishir asked. It's the creation of a life. Can't you understand the literal meaning? Crow asked. You're already so old, and you don't even know how to have a baby? Then I'll explain it to you from the beginning. Why sure, in fact, the baby is not sent by the crane it needs. It can only be sent if you charge your phone. Why sure coldly interrupted her, squinting and questioning. Who was the one who said 2 days ago that she didn't want 404? Why are you driving so fast when you're here? I just want to explain it to you. Then explain to me what the hell the sacred mark's prerequisite is that I have to have a baby. Why sure was going crazy. Besides, I'm only 17 years old, sister. I haven't reached the legal age of marriage yet. Even if I reach it, I don't have a girlfriend. Even if I have a girlfriend, there's no need for me to have a baby because of this. Crow thought for a moment and sincerely suggested, when the time comes, you can do it and deny it. Anyway, you only need to understand the process of a life's growth. If you think it's too troublesome, you can be more straightforward and ruthless. You can kill both mother and child. That's enough. Why sure glared at Crow on the title page. You want me to be a scumbag who abandons her after using her? Hey, there are only so many ways to create a life. Giving birth to a child is one of the simplest ways. Crow helplessly shrugged, with a helpless look on her face. Of course, there are other ways, but they're not as simple and fast as this. At most, you can take your time to find one. After all, I'm not the one who's anxious. I'm so troubled. The young man looked up to the sky and sighed helplessly. The white horse rolled its eyes and suddenly had the urge to kick him. Fortunately, when Huai Sure began to repeatedly jump at the limit of the white horse's endurance, they finally arrived at the place. Yamatai Arts Hall. According to the head chef, Watanabe, it was one of the older classical concert halls, and had more frequent contact with the outside world. If one were to seek communication, they would definitely not return disappointed. Just as Huai Sure was looking at the quiet building behind the door in front of him, he heard the sound of the door opening. Behind the door, a skeleton in formal attire stumbled forward and bowed to Huai Sure. I've been waiting for a long time, Mr. Huai Sure. Huai Sure raised his eyebrows. You know me? The skeleton's chin opened and closed, making a cracking sound. Although I haven't seen you before, your heroic appearance has spread throughout Yamatai. After repeatedly confirming with the headquarters, I dare to believe that after 600 years, there is actually another noble calamity musician who has graced this insignificant city. Since then, I have already made preparations to welcome you, Your Excellency. Behind the skeleton, the silent building was instantly lit up. In the dazzling light, layers of ancient doors opened, revealing a spotless and gorgeous hall. Countless candles lit up in an instant, illuminating the dazzling and complicated decorations. Please come in, Mr. Huai Sure. The skeleton enthusiastically led the way in front. Please come in. I didn't expect to be able to entertain such a noble guest at the end of my career. Huai Sure was stunned. Am I so popular in hell? Chapter 262. Half an hour ago, in the central observation room of the organizing committee. Did the cultivation base increase? Big Cousin sat in the chair behind the big screen and looked up at the data in front of him that no one other than the professionals could understand. It doesn't sound like a good thing. Although it doesn't seem to have changed much, only about 1%, the problem is that this 1% is completely out of our expectations. The data expert of Tomorrow News was a middle-aged man with a rigid expression. When he spoke, his tone was flat. There may be many reasons. It may be a simple butterfly effect, or it may not be that simple. Can't we make changes in time? We can, but it's very troublesome. The expert's tone was calm. Besides, this isn't a problem we should be concerned about. Mr. Zhu, you have to understand that Tomorrow News, as a neutral organization, shouldn't get involved in the matter between the Dongxia and Yingzhou pedigrees. This is already our limit. This is the first time I've heard you say something so moral. It really scared me. Big Cousin glanced at them in surprise. In short, you don't have enough money and want us to top up, right? The expert didn't speak. Big Cousin asked again, "Can we double it?" The expert coughed awkwardly and seemed to be moved, but then he saw Big Cousin shake his head. "Double is too expensive. Forget it, we can't afford it. Let's do it like this." With that, he leaned back on the sofa leisurely and threw the expert's reminder to the back of his mind. "Aren't you worried about where the 1% variable comes from?" the expert asked. "If we don't do anything about it, the situation may deteriorate rapidly." "Of course I'm worried, but isn't this a game?" Big Cousin asked back. "There's no such thing as a guaranteed win. We have to give the opponent a chance to turn the tables, right? This is the first time I've seen you have such competitive spirit." Even the expert's serious expression couldn't help but twitch. They had already used so many hacks, but they still wanted to have a fair fight with the opponent. The great pedigrees were indeed thick-skinned. "I can't say that they have competitive spirit, but they do have some gambler spirit." Big Cousin took one last look at the screen and withdrew his gaze. "So be it. Since everyone has already placed their bets, don't play any trick. Let's wait for the betting cup to be opened. Aren't you afraid of capsizing? There is no boat in the first place, so how can there be a boat that can capsize?" Eldest Cousin shook his head carelessly. "When the big wave comes, we'll rely on our own abilities. When the big wave is over, we'll see who's swimming naked." That was the end of the topic. Only on the screen, the 1% cultivation value was rapidly rising. In an unknown corner of Yamatai City, changes were quietly brewing. Half an hour later, in the spotless reception room, the aroma of black tea rose in spirals from the cup. "So that's how it is. A zither maker?" After listening to Huaisher's words, the skeleton slowly nodded. It was just a skeleton without any expression, but its expression made people feel disappointed. "I thought you would hold a concert. What a pity." "Ahem, to be honest, I only know how to play the cello. Even if I were to hold a concert, I wouldn't be able to play many songs, right?" Huaisher shrugged helplessly. "And my zither is broken." "Oh, if it's a zither, we have some collections." They were all tasks assigned by the headquarters. But after so many years, they have always been in the storage room, and no one has come to collect them. They probably forgot about it. The skeleton pondered for a moment before suggesting, "With your status, it's not a problem to go in and pick a few. There are many treasures. Moreover, according to what you said, the zither you use is just an ordinary item, right? It's hard to match your noble status as a disaster musician. Although I don't think my status is noble, it's better not to change the zither." Huaisher hesitated for a long time, scratching his head. "Up until now, there have been many opportunities to change the zither. But every time I seriously consider it, I give up in the end. How should I put it, we have accompanied each other for so many years. If I were to suddenly change it, it would feel like abandoning one another." The skeleton was silent for a long time, then sighed softly. "Your Excellency is a sentimental person." As he spoke, he slowly stood up with the support of the chair. His joints kept creaking, and he walked forward unsteadily. "Please follow me. I remember that 40 years ago, a craftsman passed by and left a medium. Let me see where it is." The space in the art museum was unexpectedly large. It seemed to have once been quite a bustling place. Unfortunately, it had been empty for a long time. Even if it was spotless and clean, when walking inside, it felt empty. Only the echoes of footsteps could be heard. Against the constant roars and clamors in the distance, it felt more and more deserted. "It's so lively." Huaisher stared at a pillar of fire rising from the clouds outside the window. He slowly shook his head, withdrew his gaze, and continued to follow behind the skeleton. He asked casually, "How long have you been working here?" "I forgot. It seems that I have been here since the concert hall was built." The skeleton replied in a hoarse voice. Even if it's long, it's just a waste of time. It's not worth mentioning. It opened the door of the warehouse, and after indicating for Huai Shi to wait for a while, it walked in. Not long after, it carefully held a box and handed it to Huai Shi. Inside the box was a soft velvet cloth, and wrapped in it was a small thing. After Huai Shi opened it, he saw a circular iron block that looked like a valve. It was only the size of a palm, and there was a smile engraved on it. It seemed to be the symbol of the Zither Master. How do I use this? Yamatai City is now inaccessible, so it can't be used for the time being. The skeleton explained. When you go back to the Discovery Realm, or at any open border, just find a pipe and change the valve to this. Twist it 3 times, and the Master will receive the news. He will then rush over as fast as he can. It's so convenient. Huai Shi was overjoyed. It's actually a door-to-door service? Because the Master's whereabouts are uncertain all year round, in order to make it easier for customers to find him, we might as well set up this service. At this point, the skeleton seemed to hesitate. But the Master is a little hard to talk to? Huai Shi instantly thought of the rumors about the Master's strange temper. He waved his hand and said, "It's fine if the Master has a bad temper. As long as he has the ability, I can understand." The skeleton coughed dryly and explained awkwardly, "No, the Master is actually quite easy to talk to. He treats people like a spring breeze, and his craftsmanship is excellent. He has never made any mistakes." Huai Shi was puzzled. "Isn't that even better?" "It's expensive." The skeleton glanced at him and added seriously, "Especially expensive." Huai Shi's face twitched, and the hand holding the valve trembled slightly. He held onto a thread of hope. "How expensive is it?" The skeleton thought for a moment. "It's said that regardless of whether the job is accepted or not, he will charge an ounce of spirit crystal." Huai Shi sucked in a breath of cold air, and almost lost his footing. What kind of damned Master is this? I'm just going to visit him, and he's going to charge me over $1 million? And the maintenance fees are calculated separately? If 2.1 ounces of origin substance was the standard for an adult, wouldn't this Master be charging half of his life just to do some maintenance? If this were a normal customer, they probably wouldn't be able to wait for the Master's 3rd visit. However, the Master often gives discounts. "You can try it out during the winter or summer," the skeleton suggested. "Although the price is expensive, the results are worth the price. I'm sure the final results won't disappoint you." No matter if it worked or not, this was at least a way out. Huai Shi thought for a moment, then carefully put away the token and nodded his thanks to the skeleton. He had originally been prepared to come here empty-handed, but he hadn't expected the people here to be so easy to talk to. They had directly given him the reward and even skipped the process of running the mission. "No need to thank me." The skeleton shook its head. "This is one of the services that the society provides to its members, and it is also my responsibility. It's a pity that Yamatai is only a small place. Other larger halls have artisans stationed there, so there's no need to go through so much trouble. Although that's the case, I actually don't have a sense of belonging to the Infernal Music Society." The certification of a disaster musician was also somewhat inexplicable. Besides, there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world, right? Huai Shi thought for a moment, then asked seriously, "Is there anything you need help with? Although I look like this, I'm actually quite good at fighting. As long as it's not something particularly difficult, I can usually handle it." The skeleton seemed to be stunned, staring at him in confusion, as if he had never heard anyone say that to him before. After thinking for a long time, he seemed to have gathered his courage, and 2 will-o'-the-wisps jumped in his eye sockets. "Please forgive me for being presumptuous, but can I be so bold as to ask you to play a song for me?" "Huh!" Huai Shi didn't understand. "When I started to serve the society promised that when this job was over, There would be a disaster musician to bring me to sleep. The skeleton sighed helplessly. But it's been too long, Mr. Huaishur. Although the society has made arrangements for my next step, I feel that I can't do it anymore. If it's possible, can you please set me free? Huaishur was silent for a long time, then scratched his head. Although I don't know what's going on, if that's what you want, I won't refuse. But what exactly do I have to do? You just have to do the work that a disaster musician should do. The skeleton bowed gratefully, and took out a letter from the inner pocket of his dress with both hands. He handed it over with both hands. This is the notice and permission that the society issued when I reported it to them. If you're willing to help me carry it out, it would be best. Huaishur took it doubtfully and saw a dismissal letter, as well as a stack of rather old manuscripts under the letter. The paper had turned yellow, and there were still many traces of modification, but the line notation and symbols on it were still clear. It seemed to have incredible magic. After Huaishur read the first 2 paragraphs, he actually felt that many of his understanding of music theory had become much clearer, and many new ideas and insights emerged from his heart. Experience points up. His cello performance skill, which had entered LV12, had actually grown a little. He noticed the abnormality and directly flipped to the last page. When he saw the signature at the end, the corners of his eyes couldn't help but twitch wildly. Johann Sebastian Bach. Oh my God, a manuscript of Bach's movement. Chapter 263. There was a long period of silence in the art hall. Huaishur was so shocked by the power of the Hells and the Music Association that she stood rooted to the ground. Who was Bach? He was the ancestor of all classical music theories. Even if he was not the creator, he was still the most important rule-setter. Just like Newton in the field of physics, if there was a creator of music theory, he would definitely be the one. After that, there were not many people who were more important than him. In the end, the association had given her a copy of Bach's original work, and it looked like the product of Bach's hard work. Even with Huaishur's legendary cello-playing skills, she had improved after reading the original manuscript. It was really precious, no wonder the association could be recognized by so many calamity musicians. For performers who loved art, the association was simply a treasure trove. Huaishur thought for a long time, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. Let me ask, could it be that the association— No, Mr. Bach was not a sublimator. Although his ability was not inferior to any creator, his artistic achievements were not recognized by the people at that time. The skeleton said regretfully, "It is said that he refused the association's recruitment before he died, and his consciousness did not sink into the Silver Sea. Instead, he was taken away by an unknown existence and received eternal sleep that no one could disturb." Huaishur was silent for a long time, and suddenly felt a little pity and relief. Indeed, if a creator like Bach could continue to live, who knew how many more miracles he could create? However, since such a person had chosen to face death, then he was naturally worthy of eternal peace and quiet. Now it seemed that the association had probably expected Huaishur to do this. Otherwise, why would they send him a score that was most suitable for cello adaptation? They were obviously hinting, "Little brother, look, Hell music has such a promising future. It includes insurance, housing, and year-end bonuses. It's a pity that a young talent like you doesn't go to hell." Okay. Feeling the enthusiasm of the association, Huaishur's expression could not help but twitch. "You're going to go all out with me, right? I'm the clerk of the Book of Destiny, a traitor of celestial genealogy. Do you think I'm afraid of you? You're just a sugar-coated bullet that erodes my fighting spirit. If I eat the bullet, I'll spit out the sugar-coated bullet, Arya?" Huaishur looked at it for a moment, then let out a long breath. "Okay, lend me a zither. When do we start?" "Any time." The skeleton bowed gratefully, and the will-o'-the-wisps flickered. In the blink of an eye, the scene in front of Huaishur changed, and he found himself in a huge warehouse. A dust-proof box opened in front of Huai Shi, revealing the body of an ancient zither lying on the sponge. Although it had been through a long period of time, not only was it not damaged at all under excellent maintenance, but it also faintly revealed a trace of sparkling and translucent luster after being soaked in time. When he caressed the cold body of the zither, he felt as if he was caressing a piece of cold crystal. With a slight knock, he could hear a long echo. The strings were removed and carefully stored aside. There were no traces of rust, and they were as elastic as before. Moreover, the material seemed to be extraordinary. Whether it was the twisting technique or the preservation process, it was perfect. When he held the zither in his hand, he could feel the origin substance flowing smoothly within it. It was no different from his own body, and he could feel even the slightest change. Huai Shi couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when he sensed the nearly crystallized essence of the abyss. This could already be considered a border relic, right? Good zither. Huai Shi sighed with emotion. He began to look forward to the master's craftsmanship. If his zither could also be upgraded to a border relic, it wouldn't be a loss to pay a few more origin substance crystals. In addition, some master-grade instruments were worth more than 3 or 4 million origin crystals. After a simple adjustment, Huai Shi tried to play a practice song. He felt that even though he hadn't practiced for a long time, his skills were miraculously not shaky at all. Thanks to the connection between the sword technique and the cello, if he didn't have time to practice the zither every day, he could spend an hour chopping people. The effects were actually about the same. That would be too joyous. His guilty conscience was swept away. Huai Shi lifted the zither and looked up at the skeleton in front of him. Then let's begin. The skeleton nodded excitedly. It had already changed into a more solemn dress and bowed to Huai Shi to express its sincere gratitude. In an instant, the light and shadow in front of him changed. In the darkness, a beam of light shone down and fell on Huai Shi's shoulder, illuminating his hands and the bow in his hand. He was already on a huge stage, and in the empty audience seats below the stage, the old skeleton had already taken his seat and was sitting upright, waiting quietly. It was the first time he was playing in such a formal place, but the place was actually in hell? Huai Shi chuckled softly, feeling as if she had misunderstood something. But there was a stage, an audience, and he had a zither. All of this was right? So, let's begin. It was his first performance after becoming a calamity musician. Under the light, Huai Shi took a deep breath, lowered his eyes, and stared at the score on the shelf in front of him. The bow fell from his hand as if it was weaving notes. Following his careful movements, the first strand of soft music rose from the strings like a cloud and spread in all directions, carrying a low melancholy and joy as it danced in the air. In the audience, the old skeleton couldn't help but straighten his body and lean forward. The wisps in his eye sockets trembled with excitement. He wanted to move forward, wanted to stretch out his hands, and couldn't wait to bathe in the rain of compassion. The cello solo transformed from Bach's string suite, the Song of the G string, that Huai Shi improvised based on the model in front of him, began just like that. The cello in Huai Shi's hands was humming in a low voice. A mellow and gentle melody slowly emerged and spread through the air. It was not violent or intense. Instead, it was as tranquil as spring water. It gently covered everything, smoothing out the restlessness and uneasiness, causing all souls to return to peace. Just listening quietly made the dead who should have died long ago shed tears. It made all souls in pain feel at peace. Huai Shi once again fell into a meditative trance, staring at the yellowed movement in front of him in a daze, feeling a great will surging in the records between the lines. Everything that the creator wanted to say, the emotions he wanted to express, and the melody he wanted to create, had emerged directly from the soul at this moment. Even though the instrument and medium were already different, it was as if there was a teacher standing beside him, teaching every knot and every note personally. The gentleness and compassion poured into the melody was all in Huai Shi's hands. The source substance of the mountain ghost poured into the body of the zither like a torrent. In the low vibration, it quietly blended into the invisible melody, filling the outline created by the past, extending along the trunk of change, once again creating a fleeting miracle. That was indeed a miracle. It was a miracle that existed only in this short performance, a magnificent flash that was fleeting like magic. It placed an indiscriminate mercy on this melody, soothing every painful consciousness, calming all despair, and allowing all obsession to welcome the promised release in the long years. It turned into a gentle encouragement at the beginning of a long journey of suffering, as if waiting for the end of the road. In the gentle sound of the zither, all loneliness seemed to have a meaning. Even if the years were wasted, it was as if he had returned to the concert hall of the past, staring at his past companions under the brilliant lights, recalling the impassioned symphony and chorus. But all of this had already come to an end, as if no matter how grand the melody was, it would all come to an end. At some unknown time, the old skeleton was already lying down on a chair. At the corner of his eye, a drop of pure origin substance condensed into a tear slowly slid down. "How beautiful were we in the past," he softly muttered, intoxicated by the brief reappearance of yesterday. Yesterday reappeared. As the gentle melody on the stage spread, the entire concert hall seemed to come alive. The silent lights lit up one by one, and faint illusions appeared in the empty seats. Those illusions of the past walked through the hallway, silently chatting and laughing with each other, their eyes filled with hope and longing. All of the gloominess was given color by the melody. It was as if under the illumination of the tiny candlelight, everything that had been silent in the darkness was once again awakened, revealing the brilliance and splendor of the past. Under the cover of the melody, even the rumbling sounds in the distance were insignificant. Even if the sounds were wild and earth-shattering. Even if destruction was close at hand. But the tiny music still spread out, stubbornly flying into the sky, sprinkling down like rain, passing through the scenes of destruction and the rumbling sounds of battle, indiscriminately sprinkling on the earth. In this gentle melody, the struggle between the two major systems had already climbed to the climax. 15 minutes ago, on the high wall, Yi Shuiyi slowly turned his head, staring at the subordinates dripping with blood behind him, the corners of his eyes slowly raised. "So that's how it is?" As if regretfully, she softly sighed. "Who is the traitor? Guyu or Gao Hao?" "It's Guyu." Luo Shen lifted his broken arm, making it easier for Shen Yu to bandage him. He quickly reported, "He killed Bai Hao, took a dark gold item and 2 border relics and left. I couldn't catch up." "It's not your fault. After all, no one will guard against their own teammates all day long." Yi Shuiyi shook his head. "You don't need to worry. I'm afraid it won't be long before he comes to our door." Luo Shen raised his head, puzzled. "This kind of information, it has a time limit." Yi Shuiyi tilted his head, lighting a cigarette. "Especially now that our main forces are all out, the camp's guards are weak. This kind of information won't be valuable in another half an hour. If the other side has any movements, it should be in these 10 minutes. Before his voice fell, a world-shaking explosion came from the distance. A huge pillar of fire soared into the sky, wildly releasing a tyrannical light in all directions. In an instant, it completely uprooted a stronghold hidden outside the stronghold. Immediately after, there was a second, a third, and even a fourth in the end. Under the cover of the 4 pillars of fire, the entire Ginza district was already sealed within. "It's here." Yi Shuiyi lifted his eyes, revealing a happy smile. It was as if his entire person had become excited, impatient. After enduring for so long, he could finally have a good fight with someone. Chapter 264. 20 minutes ago, on a tall building outside the Ginza district, the man named Gu Yu put down his binoculars. His face changed, and his expression became sluggish. After a long time, a bone-white mask appeared on his face. On it was a face that seemed to be in deep sleep, but it was lifeless. It made people want to avoid it. But after Gu Yu's face was removed, the mask seemed much more lively. The drooping eyes looked up, and the yellow eyeballs slowly turned twice, as if they had not seen light for a long time. Unfortunately, I can't use this identity anymore. He casually threw the box in his arms on his body and sighed. He was discovered when he sneaked in, and after hiding for so long, all his efforts were in vain. But it was enough to gather so much information. He didn't expect that he would be able to gather so much crucial information from a casual change at the beginning. As he sighed, cracking sounds came from his body. Like yellow soil under the scorching sun, layers of cracks appeared. The people beside him were already prepared. A palm-sized box opened, and a few of them took out a large piece of crystal-clear ointment. They quickly tore off his clothes and smeared it all over his body. Under the secret healing ointment, Gu Yu's broken body was barely restored. But this person looked like he was on the verge of death, and was heavily injured. Although the weak sorcerer is useful, there is a limit. The middle-aged man looked down at him. The pleasing frame can give false life, but it can't heal the damage to the soul and the sacred mark. If your sacred mark collapses here, no one can save you. Got it. The weak sorcerer sighed and raised his finger. Do you have a cigarette? I haven't smoked for 3 or 4 days, I'm suffocating. Soon, the cigarette was lit. He was helped up and leaned against the wall. After sorting out his thoughts, he began to report the information he had obtained. Among the ascendants, Ingzhou's lineage had always been known as the chemistry lineage. One of the main reasons for this was that the various stigmata that circulated outside were mostly spirits born from various monsters and items. In other words, they were known as the 99 gods or miracles of chemistry. Most of them were monsters and demons. The rare good ones were fine, but the fatal flaw was that they were congenitally deficient. Although there was no lack of high-level stigmata, there was a lack of communication channels between the gods and the demons at the lower levels. There was an almost monopolistic gap between them. Even if it was guaranteed that those in the upper echelons could always control those in the lower echelons, the temporary convenience could not make up for such a huge flaw, the lack of a powerhouse who could take charge. Even though there were edicts in history that encouraged the integration of gods and Buddhas, a large number of foreign miracles were introduced, and a large number of source books that referenced the Eastern Xia and Indian genealogies, there were still not many paths of ascension that could be taken from the bottom up, apart from the power that the imperial family and the various ministers had secretly reserved. Perhaps due to the influence of the celestial genealogy, Ingzhou was the first to modify and revise the stigmata in the genealogy. Although it created many evil creatures and eroded bodies, the final result was obviously enough to make up for the huge sacrifice. He had extracted the true essence of the chemical genealogy and created several complete paths of sublimation that were collectively known as energy. From the very first day this force was created, it was directly under the control of the imperial court, a secret organization overseen by each generation of law overlords. Through the continuous selection of talents and trial and error, it formed the current Ingzhou's external sublimation organization, Looming Hall. If other stigmata could still be obtained by outsiders, then the energy stigmata was still firmly held in the hands of the Tianjin branch represented by the ministers, relying on it as a sharp weapon against the Wu family faction. Well, it would be even better if a certain wild warrior who was still loafing around in the Social Security Bureau could commit suicide, and now, Guyu no, the Ingzhou Sublimer, was showing a secret advancement from the energy branch, a strange stigmata known as the weak sorcerer. In the original legend, the weak sorcerer was just a pitiful and powerless child, a character who drowned in the Tao after running away from home. Now, after combining many stigmata recreations, he had changed his appearance. After discarding all insignificant abilities, he obtained the ability called Zhuozi. Just like a painted skin, as long as it was a sublimer under the third step, after he personally killed them, he could perfectly disguise them. Their personality, style, and even short-term memories were all flawless. Even when the stigmata's abilities were weakened, they could still be preserved. As long as there wasn't an intense battle, no one would be able to see any flaws. It was by relying on this that he was able to sneak into the Social Security Bureau, change his appearance step by step, and come into contact with the core secret. Aside from the hidden stake, there are 14 sublimers, all of them at the third step. The stigmata records are all in my pocket. He panted violently. The others have all gone to the Central District. Their speed has increased. If we don't stop them quickly, Yamatai City will completely fall into the hands of the Social Security Bureau. Where did they get this ability? The middle-aged man frowned. The rookie competition is limited to the third step. A third-step sublimer can't break through the Central District's core blockade. At best, they can only rely on the rookie competition to gain an advantage, but they can't completely take it down. I don't know, but they have a trump card. It's at the bottom of the Mitsukoshi building. The weak wizard shook his head. For such a long time, they have been preparing a border relic. It seems like they are smelting and reassembling it. After the 3 scholars went in, they didn't come out at all. I prepared for a few days, but as soon as I revealed the slightest intention of spying, I was suspected. But according to my guess, it won't be long before that border relic is completely assembled. At that time, I'm afraid that we won't have any chance to stop the Eastern Summer lineage. These days, he could feel the terrifying origin substance fluctuations coming from underground every day. However, this enormous power was firmly suppressed by Yishuia's army. Not even the slightest bit leaked out. He didn't know what that thing was, but without a doubt, it had the ability to determine victory or defeat. He had to seize it or simply destroy it. We need to hurry up. The middle-aged man's expression became unsightly. The Mountain Maiden mask appeared on his face. He turned around to look at the person beside him. Is there any news from the Kunlun 8 Immortals? The subordinate shook his head. It's hard to break through the Shinua framework seal in a short period of time. Communication with the outside world has always been intermittent, but last time, he said that he was already prepared. As long as, before he could finish speaking, his expression froze. The mask involuntarily appeared on his face. The sinister Yiksha's demonic face constantly changed, and a crack actually appeared on it. Behind him, a formless vortex formed from interweaving clouds slowly spread out. In an instant, a crack appeared in the Shinua framework seal. However, this crack was too small, and only a single strand of origin substance could pass through. The Mountain Maiden was overjoyed. She glanced at the subordinates beside her and waved her hand. 2 people immediately threw themselves into the vortex, becoming a part of it. Thunder rumbled as the vortex expanded. The origin substance that had emerged from the vortex could be described as an ocean. It descended from the sky like a waterfall, pouring into the Yiksha's face. The ascendant knelt on the ground and howled, unable to endure the enormous power. Until a fierce light flashed through the vortex, and a streak of lightning shot into his body. The Yiksha suddenly exploded into a bloody mist. Immediately afterwards, the bloody mist shrank, forming a mangled human figure. As the vortex gradually dissipated, the figure kneeling on the ground raised his face. The pitch-black wings on his back slowly spread open, shaking off the blood. Lord Shizhou. All of the ascendants present knelt to welcome him. In just a few short seconds, with the infusion of power from outside the vortex and the Yiksha's stigmata as a coordinate, the powerhouse from Seat had already broken through the Shinua framework seal, descending into this ancient city. A pair of wooden clogs stepped on the rooftop, a pure white monk's robes flapping in the wind. The newcomer raised his bird-like mask and spoke in a low voice. His words made everyone present go wild with joy. Now that I have abandoned my previous surname, you can just call me Heaven City Square. The support was even more exaggerated than expected. The Immortal Island lineage had spared no expense to send a complete Fourth Order Ascendant into Yamatai City. The one who had arrived was no longer the Third Order Yiksha Stoneboat, but a Fourth Order Ascendant, a walking legend, Crow Tengu. Under the gaze of that pair of eyes, the entire city was instantly seen through. Sensing the presence not far away, the Ascendant who called himself Sky City Square raised his eyebrows. Yi Shueya, he sighed softly. No wonder the Minister of the Left is so nervous. That woman is indeed not an easy opponent. Just as well, let me get rid of my depression. As an Ascendant who was also active in the borders, Yiksha Stoneboat had won a lot of fame, and could be said to have achieved a lot in battle. However, he had always been suppressed by that fox girl called Yi Shueya. For many years, there was not a day that he did not think of wiping away his shame. The funny thing was that he, who was suppressed, was the first to complete the fusion of his soul and stigmata, breaking through to become Crow Tengu. Yi Shueya, on the other hand, was unable to advance because of the incompatibility between her soul and stigmata. She could be said to be the strongest in Eastern Xia, but she was stuck at the last step, even if there was only a difference of one number between the Third Order and the Fourth Order. However, the difference in quality between ether and starseed was more than that of clouds and mud. The difference couldn't be measured. However, after seeing that their opponent was Yi Shueya, Sky City Square was still extremely alert. After all, she was once a strong opponent. Moreover, in the legends of the borders, that woman had a battle record of defeating a Fourth Order Ascendant. Even if it was just a legend without any basis, it still proved the extent of Yi Shueya's ferocity. Otherwise, how could she be elected as the number one in the new generation of Eastern Xia lineage? He had to go all out and quickly settle this. It wasn't just for victory, but also to show respect to this strong opponent of his. From his hand, a crimson-red bow slowly appeared. The moment it appeared, everyone present felt a piercing pain in their eyes. They were shocked by the pure divinity in it and couldn't stand steadily. Chapter 265. Hachibana Bow? Mountain Granny cried out in surprise, and then she was overjoyed. She didn't expect Crow Tengu to be carrying this weapon that had been worshipped in the Hachibana shrine for hundreds of years. After such a long time of worship, this border relic, which was transformed from the divine mark of the former dragon god, had been endowed with divinity, and its destructive power against the divine mark could be described as terrifying. Damn it, there are no more dragons in this world. Crow Tengu raised the Hachibana bow in his hand and couldn't help but sigh softly. His tone was filled with helplessness and anger. Yes, there were no more dragons in this world. Ever since the Eastern Summer genealogy completed the heavenly passage, all divinity related to the dragons of Eastern Summer had been completely cut off. But apart from Eastern Summer, how many dragons in the various realms, borders, and hells had divinity? With the support of the American genealogy, and the fact that it had nothing to do with Eastern Summer, the feathered serpent god didn't even lose a single hair. But apart from that, it was almost a catastrophe. Whether it was the winged dragon, the yellow dragon, the azure dragon, the white dragon, or even the dragon gods worshipped by the four seas, their divinity disappeared overnight. This included the many dragon gods of Ingzhou, who had been demoted in a single night and reduced to serpents. Many river masters had disappeared in a single night, and those who survived had either changed their masters in time or were struggling at death's door. This Hachibana bow went from a true divine weapon to a border relic with some divinity. Who knew how many dragon gods and the divinity that they had cultivated for so many years were swept away? With such a sudden catastrophe, how could the Ingzhou genealogy explain themselves? Back then, the Eastern Summer genealogy's attitude was resolute, decisive, and terrifying. No one could stop them. Don't try to stop them. Whoever tried to stop them would die. 70 years of preparation had been completed in an instant, just like a raging fire sweeping through the wind. After that, even the Astronomical Society couldn't interfere with the Eastern Summer Genealogy's family affairs. If you asked why, weren't the dragon gods worshipped in Ingzhou, Myanmar, and all the other regions of Asia radiated from the Origin Codex of Eastern Summer? Back then, when the Origin Codex was opened, they didn't reject it. Now that it's not open, they're getting angry? Where did this logic come from? After so many years of sacrifice and nurturing, the golden threads that had been accumulated year after year had now become someone else's wedding dress. The entire nation had worked hard for 100 years to help the Eastern Xia dynasty complete an earth-shattering undertaking. Heavenly Terminus. Apart from the dragon god's divinity harvested from all over the world, the East Xia Empire had also invested an astonishing amount of capital. Not only had they given up on several paths of ascension that could allow them to become their natural enemy, even the previous Torch Dragon had given up on his divine side and turned into the Torch Dragon. In the end, the enormous divinity, stigmata, and power that were enough to create a living god didn't fall into anyone's hands. Instead, they turned into real dragon veins that ran through the country and radiated to the entire border of East Xia. From that moment onwards, there were no more true dragons in the world. This power had been given to every inch of land and member of the Eastern Xia kingdom without holding back. It was from that year onwards that the Eastern Xia lineage ushered in its current golden era. It wasn't just the ascension of 14 level 5 experts, the expansion of countless hells, and the appearance of 16 large-scale borders. Even before the previous natural enemy had passed away, the new natural enemy, Chu Hai, had already been born. In those short 10 years, the Eastern Xia lineage actually had 2 natural enemies that it had never had before. It completely suppressed the Russian Federation lineage and competed with the Roman lineage for the number 1 position in the world, becoming the undisputed overlord of the present world. When the outpouring of talents temporarily stopped, everyone thought that the Eastern Xia lineage, which had nearly doubled in size, would temporarily rest and recuperate. However, right after that, the White Emperor's son, who had been crowned at the age of 12, appeared. In addition, there was a terrifying foundation that couldn't be seen, and there were all sorts of new talents that constantly rose to prominence over the years. Decline after the peak? Decline my ass. In this world, there was only the principle of the strong becoming stronger and the weak becoming weaker. If not for this, how could the 8 banners bow, which had once destroyed the fan of 6 armies from 100 miles away and cut off the lifeline of the Ping family and decide the future of Ingzhou for the next 1,000 years, weakened to such an extent? Just thinking about this, Tian Qingfang's hatred burned fiercely in his heart. Immediately, he noticed the source of this crazy hatred, the longbow in his hand. Sensing the existence of the divine mark of the Eastern Xia lineage, this longbow was so angry that it could no longer hold back. Very good, very good. With your help, this battle is settled. Tian Qingfang happily absorbed the hatred into his chest. Then, a small and heavy metal mallet appeared in his chest. Just by shaking it, countless lightning bolts burst out of the mallet, which stung people's eyes. This was the miracle that was forged after combining his own soul, the divine mark of Crow Tengu. Namo-Hachiman, please help me achieve this martial arts fate. He laughed loudly and opened his arms. Set off an earth-shattering thunder. At this moment, as the divine mark of Crow Tengu and the Hachiman bow formed a link through the source form, the 2 completely different miracles merged in his hand as if they were from the same source. In the end, only a brilliance that was too bright to be seen by the naked eye was left. It seemed to be a longsword. The style was simple and elegant, but the shape constantly changed between the light of fire and lightning. In the end, it formed a loud noise that seemed to tear the sky and earth apart. After combining the Hachiman Bao and the divine mark of Kro Tengu with the supreme secret of the lineage, this divinity was released in the most intense way possible, forming a genuine miracle. Miracle Mark, Imperial Thunder Construction. Or it could be called the Ten-Grasped Sword. At this moment, as the ten-grasped sword was raised and slashed down, a gust of wind rose and whistled. Then, from afar, a thunderbolt lashed down, and a terrifying pillar of fire rose from the ground, engulfing everything. There was no need for Heaven City Square to activate or infuse it. The miraculous carvings automatically extracted the free origin substance from Yamatai City, continuously releasing this destructive energy. The moment the fire rose, every pair of startled eyes were illuminated by the tyrannical light. At that moment the war began. All of you, hold the line for me. Kro Tengu spread his wings, holding the ten-grasped sword in his hand, and soared into the sky, charging straight for Ginza. In an instant, he crossed a long distance and arrived in the sky above the Mitsukoshi building. High up in the sky, he looked down. The ten-grasped sword slashed down. Another pillar of fire rose, followed by a third and a fourth. In the instant that the 4 pillars of fire soared into the sky, the entire Ginza was sealed by that terrifying heat. This was already not a power that a sublimator could compare to, but a genuine miracle. The power of the past gods was engraved in history, and now it appeared in this place. The power of the miracle mark brought about complete destruction, tearing apart the outer defenses like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Then, it slashed down towards the Mitsukoshi building, which was shrouded in layers of dense fog. Miracle mark, huh? It's hard to deal with. In that instant Yi Shuya raised his eyebrows. Amidst the terrifying flames that descended from the sky and rose from the ground, he raised a finger and waved it horizontally. Countless dense fog suddenly enveloped Ginza, and then quickly dissipated. The entire Mitsukoshi building had already disappeared without a trace. Then, following the flicking of Yi Shuya's 10 fingers, countless traces that were hard to distinguish with the naked eye flew out in a crisscross pattern, enveloping the entire Ginza area. With the support of the Green Hill Army, she was able to obtain a nearly endless source of origin substance for herself to squander. In an instant, the entire Ginza turned into an illusion. Then, the soul ability was activated. Farewell. After a long period of brewing and change, the soul ability that was almost on the verge of a metamorphosis revealed a terrifying power here. Following the drawing of her fingers in the air, countless white lines like spider silk crisscrossed in the sky above Ginza. They were so thin that they were hard to notice, but they were so straight that not even a millimeter of error existed. Then, the Ginza parted. Yi Shuya's soul ability was very simple. It was only to separate 2 things, as if the 2 things had never been together. But such a pure effect applied on such a huge scale, it formed a terrifying change. The entire Ginza was cut into pieces by the crisscrossing white lines, and then chaotically pieced together by the heart-moon fox's illusion. Front, back, left, right, up, down, all directions lost their meaning, and there was no difference between inside and outside. The tyrannical flames of the 10 grasped swords fell from the sky, but following Kro Tengu's slash, it sprayed out from the right side of the Ginza, sweeping across, burning all the tall buildings in the distance to ashes. Feudal! Kro Tengu sneered. This is not like you, Yi Shuya. How long can you hide? How long can the Green Hills illusion last? How long can your ability last? Who knows, maybe it's longer than you can support the miracle engraving. Yi Shuya revealed the side of her face from the countless shattered mirrors. She smiled resplendently. This is called defending and waiting for reinforcement. A good woman like me can advance and retreat. Wait until the Astronomy Association reinforcements I call for arrive. I'll immediately come out and kill you. Ridiculous! Sky City Square sneered. It would be strange if the Astronomy Association interfered in the struggle between the Eastern Summer and the Ing continent. But for some reason, when she said this, Sky City Square felt a faint uneasiness in his heart. Perhaps it was the shadow of the past, or perhaps it was just a simple premonition. In the midst of the fierce attack, he suddenly waved his hand and ordered the other looming hall subordinate. I will hold off that woman and send you in. Next, you just need to find the thing hidden at the bottom. Don't worry about anything else. Mountain Maiden nodded. It was time to go all out. The ascendants that had been temporarily recruited from Sodom and Renxiatong's teams, in addition to all the members of the looming hall, a total of more than 40 ascendants instantly gathered in one place. Immediately afterwards, the mountain elder pulled out a large stick from behind her back and infused it with origin substance. A chilling, solemn aura began to rise from the stick. Immediately afterwards, a line of pitch-black words appeared on the body of the stick. Unfortunately, because it had been so long, only the 3 words "Soul of the Navy" could be seen. The rest could not be seen clearly. This was the most precious border relic that the looming hall had obtained from this operation. However, its ability was not to kill enemies, but to strengthen their own people. As the large stick was raised, the person at the front took off his jacket. Mountain Maiden took a deep breath and yelled, "Origin!" The large stick fell. The ascendants' faces instantly turned ashen. Immediately after, their bodies began to swell, as if they had really been injected with their origin and courage. Origin substance fluctuations overflowed from their bodies, and the power of the sacred mark became unprecedentedly active. After one, there was a second. After injecting 10 or so people with their origin, Mountain Maiden collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Naturally, there were others who came over to continue her work. In just a few minutes, all of the ascendants had received the injection of their origin. After knowing shame, they became even more courageous. It was as if they had eaten an all-nourishing pill. Their faces were all flushed red, and they could not wait to throw themselves into the battlefield. Preparations were complete. Sky City Square nodded. The ten-grasped sword in his hand suddenly retracted all of its light and slashed forward. It was an exquisite sword technique secretly passed down from the Heavenly Dog's sacred mark. The Heavenly Dog had won. Immediately after, an illusion opened. Chapter 266. In the legends, Crow Tengu was more famous for his swordsmanship other than his various strange technique. 1,000 years ago, there was a saying that Crow Tengu had passed down his swordsmanship to the original meaning scripture. 1,000 years later, the Ingzhou swordsmanship that had been passed down to this day still contained a lot of the essence of Tengu. Although the later generations could not hope to reach the terrifying level of attainment of the founder, there were still secret techniques from the new dark school. The 6 secret techniques that came from the same source as Crow Tengu were known as Tengu Shing and could also be recorded as Tengu copied. At this moment, Heaven City Square displayed his most proficient technique of the 6 techniques, the Thunder Continuing Blade. After accumulating power for a moment, the 10 swords swept past. The illusion of Green Hill shook, the fog suddenly dissipating, revealing the silver platform that intersected into a maze. After a long time, a line of slash appeared in the air along with a burst of electricity. The Thunder Continuing Blade was known for its lightning-fast speed. Even though its destructive power wasn't as great as Swallow Flight or Tengu's profundity, a single slash of the blade could cut off a wisp of light from an illusory illusion, turning reality into illusion, and vice versa. It was specifically designed to counter large-scale origin substances like illusions. Ever since he became Crow Tengu, Heaven City Square had been practicing this technique day and night. It could not be that he did not have the intention to one day be able to hold his head high against Yi Shui. At this moment, with the 10 swords in his hand, one part of its power could be increased to 100%. The illusion that had been created with the help of the Green Hill Army for several days was actually cut open by his sword. Without needing Heaven City Square's orders, the sublimators who had been infused with their roots let out a scream. Their blood rushed to their heads, and they charged in without a care for their own safety. Yi Xueya, this woman, was very mysterious. After experiencing so many battles at the border, she had never revealed her trump card. She hid her methods very well. Everyone who had seen her was already dead. Heaven City Square was not willing to take any risk. A fourth level against a third level, and with the divine mark in his hand, the situation was in his favor. He had the intention to fight steadily and surely, using the big picture to break through the small situation. It was a good opportunity to let this group of people see what other methods Yi Xueya had. So cowardly? Yi Xueya's light laughter came from the broken silver throne. Even if you've advanced to the fourth step, you still haven't made any progress. Men have to be a bit braver, only then will they have good luck with women. For a guy like you who doesn't know how to enjoy life, is it Crow Tengu or Turtle Prime Minister? Tian Qingfang's expression did not change. He stepped forward and slashed down with his sword again. Boom! The pillar of fire swept across, and the surging heat quickly condensed in the air, turning into a thin line. It passed through the countless parting trajectories, and then exploded with a loud bang. As a result, the heat wave engulfed the entire Ginza, and a narrow street was turned into ashes in an instant. The Mitsukoshi building hidden in the deepest part of the maze was revealed in an instant. The sublimators who rushed in seized the opportunity. "Follow me!" In the midst of the chaos, one of the looming hall's ascenders suddenly shouted. Immediately after, he raised his flushed face and clenched his fists. A gust of evil wind rose out of nowhere and swept the group of people away without a trace. Only the grayish-black rainwater randomly splashed in all directions. In an instant, after passing through layers and layers of obstacles, they appeared again. They were already floating in the broken sky, very close to the side of the Mitsukoshi building. Immediately after, in mid-air, the sublimator with a flushed face discovered that his body had been cut in half at some point. He opened his mouth to say something, but the Ingzhou chemical genealogy's stigmata train cracked open a crack. His whole body suddenly exploded into a mass of blood rain, randomly splashing in all directions. The border relic root infusion rod, that mountain elder took out, after being blessed by the root, could temporarily increase the sublimator's battle power to an inconceivable level, almost doubling it for up to an hour. But the disadvantage was that after an hour, the sublimator would immediately lose the strength to truss a chicken. And because the strength was too inflated, there would be a debuff called Divine Wind. Once heavily injured, the sublimator would immediately self-destruct. Although the buff was strong, it was very evil. It could only be said that the soul of the Navy was really not a good thing. Since they were only one step away from the Mitsukoshi building, it was naturally not a problem for the sublimators. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen sublimators with flushed faces had already smashed through the glass and rushed in. Immediately after, they saw an iron pillar that was even more exaggerated than the root infusion rod sweeping over. The wind whistled and the sound of explosions rang out. The person at the front exploded on the spot, bursting into blazing flames like a bomb. The iron pillar was melted by the sublimator's self-destruction before he died. The sublimator that originally swung the iron pillar flew backwards and was barely supported by his teammate. "Are you okay?" Shin Yu asked while gasping for breath. "I'm fine even if you're not." Guan Hai's red phoenix eyes widened. He supported himself against the wall and crawled up. The muscles all over his body swelled up again. He pointed at his head and said, 200 people's shift isn't enough, give me 200 more. You've been strengthened, hurry up and send it. Shin Yu didn't say anything and slapped him on the back. Guan Hai suddenly swelled up again. Blood was about to seep out of his pores, and his whole body was burning red. Immediately after, Shin Yu's 10 fingers tapped together. After using up all the buffs on his teammates, he shrank to the back and raised his gun to cover for them. After volunteering for a long period of training, he was no longer as weak as before. He really relied on himself to find a place in the action team. If Jin Mu could see this day, he would probably be happy for him, right? A roar came from outside the building again. Time was of the essence. Whether it was the sublimators that had been injected with the soul of the Navy or the Social Security Bureau members who were working overtime, they all felt a burst of pressure. They all sped up at the same time, and the entire building that had been cut into a maze began to shake. If it wasn't an abyss building that had been assimilated by hell, it probably wouldn't have been able to support such a fierce battle between dozens of sublimators. No, it might have already collapsed in the battle between Moonfox and Crow Tengu in the outside world. Hoarse laughter sounded like an owl, spreading above the sky. The gray and black wings spread out. Tian Qing Fong held the seal of miracles in his hand and used the external force of swordsmanship to instantly recover his qi. Like wind and fire, he slashed twice in a row. The two people's secret swords crisscrossed, forming a huge flame cross, pressing down from the sky. Like a hot knife through butter, the Green Hill illusion that was barely mending was instantly shattered. Countless silver tracks cut by other principles collapsed under the slash of the 10-grasped sword. The entire Ginza was instantly lowered by several meters. It was as if it was hit by an infinite force like a nail by 3 inches in an instant. The outer layer of the building collapsed. In the roar, dust flew out. The 10-grasped sword slashed down again. A tragic crack appeared on Yi Shuiya's upper body. The light of flames appeared on the scar, penetrating deep into the bone marrow. Even if the change didn't damage the sacred mark in time, a silhouette of the Mitsukoshi building that was hidden in the fog finally emerged. "What's going on?" Tian Qing Fong laughed mockingly. "Yi Shuiya, it's rare to see you in such a sorry state." Yi Shuiya's expression didn't change. He only raised his eyes to look at the enemy in the sky and sighed softly. "Tengu? There are similar names in the 28 constellations, but they're not the same thing." The 10-grasped sword slashed down. In an instant, a mournful slash mark appeared on the Mitsukoshi building. But immediately after, a white light that made Tian Qing Fong's heart palpitate shot out from the building. It quietly swept past. Wherever it passed, all the Yingzhou sublimators that rushed in lost their voices. As if they were erased. Then, he disappeared. Dead. Just like the scene that Huai Shi saw on the first night when he broke into Yamatai City. Wherever the white light passed, whether it was the sublimators of the Social Security Bureau or the invading Yingzhou people, they all turned into ashes. Among all the dark gold items, it was the only dark gold item with a limited number of uses. A simple and crude attack. Everyone who was hit by the white light would die, including the user himself. Tian Qing Fong sucked in a breath of cold air. Soon after, his back couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Scared. He didn't think that as a 4th-stage sublimator with divinity, he would be instantly killed by the white light. But what was more troublesome was that if he was really hit by the white light, the rules of the pleasing frame would undoubtedly be imposed on him. At that time, he would be like a reptile that fell into a spider's web, waiting for the giant goose group to play with him. When he thought of how he almost rushed in, he felt a burst of fear. This female fox actually hid such a sinister trap. She was indeed his greatest enemy. He couldn't underestimate her purely because of her rank. Seeing that the trap that he had prepared for so long, Tian Qing Fong actually didn't hit, Yi Shuiya couldn't help but feel regretful. This is going to be difficult. Heart Moonfox was the best at positional warfare, especially this kind of defensive counterattack. As long as Tian Qing Fong entered the silver base, there would still be a fight. But now, he was relying on the miracle engraving outside to slowly wear down his positional advantage. Just like a high wall facing the constant bombardment of mortars, there would always be a time when it couldn't hold on. Moreover, for a Tier 3 to fight a Tier 4, the win rate was already so low that it could be ranked first in Eastern Summer. Now that Sky City Square was so cautious, There was no hope of turning the situation around. Yi Shuiyi frowned. He waved his hand and took out an old hanging picture. He shook it twice and threw out 3 huge monkeys that were unknown whether they were baboons or old ape. The 3 old monkeys rolled on the ground, scratching their ears and cheek. These 3 were border mutants hired by the Mitsukoshi building. One was called Don't Speak, one was called Don't Listen, and one was called Don't See. But now, this was called Looking Fiercely Without Looking, Crazily Listening Without Listening, and chattering non-stop from the moment he landed on the ground. Miss Yi, why did you call us here? Have you changed into new clothes? The clothes are nice, but the hairstyle doesn't match you. Your face is a little pale, and you don't seem to be in a good mood. Your expression is so solemn. You'll have wrinkles on your head when you're old. Hey, why aren't you saying anything? Are you feeling unwell? If you're feeling unwell, then hurry and find a doctor. Don't just stand here and waste time. Speaking of which, why did you call us out? Is there an enemy? I've already told you to be kind to others, to be merciful. Otherwise, if revenge breeds revenge, when will there ever be an end? Let me see where the enemy is. Fuck, a divine mark? Or a tier 4? Why didn't you say so earlier? We can't beat them at all. What I want to say is, did you give me a chance? Yi Shuiyi glanced at him and shook her head. I know you guys can't beat them. Don't worry about me sending you to your death. Then why did you call us out? Don't say it was hard to understand. Just as he was about to chatter nonstop, he saw Yi Shuiyi's gradually ice-cold smile. Just to let you guys see. She raised her eyes and stared at the direction of the sky. When necessary, lend a hand. This is called being prepared for nothing. The rumbling sound rose again. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.